gold tycoon in America in 1850. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 101 All-Rounder? John, you are so stupid that you actually cooperated with Brandon's gang of bandits. You even left behind evidence like letters and dollar bills. You are as greedy and stupid as your grandfather, in the camp of the New York State Consortium in Sacramento. After learning that Liang Zhao had dispatched troops to wipe out the bandits headed by Brandon at lightning speed and destroyed their den, the representatives of the major family chaebols in New York State were all devastated. Grover Morris, a well-established old aristocrat of New York City Bank, even mocked John's grandfather, Old Astor. They all complained that John cooperated with Brandon and did things dirty, leaving behind handles, which was not in line with their aristocratic style. John, what you did damaged the image of our aristocracy. You have disgraced the aristocrats of New York State. Orion, the representative of the Livingston family, followed closely behind and stabbed John. Aristocratic image? When you ate my beef, you didn't have any aristocratic image at all. Your food was not much better than that of the beggars on the streets of New York. John was very angry. The beef you ate last week was brought by Brandon from Suther's farm. At that time, you praised it as the most delicious food in the world. In addition to being angry, John also felt very wronged. The food that was obtained from Brandon was eaten by everyone present more deliciously than the other. Several New York Tycoon representatives who were about to continue to vent their anger on John stopped their fire in time. We should stop the meaningless debate. Now is not the time to quarrel and shirk responsibility. Milner stopped this meaningless and endless debate. John is also thinking about all of us. None of us want to see this result. John cast a grateful look at Milner's. Milton, you still understand me. I do this so that everyone can have enough food. It's ridiculous that the sons of aristocratic merchants who used to be served with delicacies from land and sea in New York are now pursuing to have enough food in California. Gentlemen, I think we have underestimated our opponent. Liang Zhao is not only business-minded, but also politically minded. He knows business, politics, and even military affairs. He is a very tough opponent. Milner's side, we need to re-evaluate this opponent. Milers, you think too highly of him. He is at best a knowledgeable country bumpkin. Besides, we have Congress behind us, right? Glover said with disdain. Brandon may be a country bumpkin, but Liang Zhao is definitely not. Glover, please put aside your prejudice. It is a foregone conclusion that Fremont and Gwynn will become senators in California, Milner said seriously, and the financial backer behind them is Liang Zhao. Do you still think he is a country bumpkin? Milner's had just received a letter from New York. Fremont and Gwynn were about to become the first senators in California. This was terrible news for their New York consortium. It has been confirmed. John felt incredible. Each state only had 2 fixed seats for senators, not representatives allocated according to population proportion. America is very tolerant of any position in New Jersey, even if you put a price on it. However, America has always been very strict about the 2 senator positions. You can't become a senator just by having money. In order to control the New Jersey senator election, Washington even tampered with the nomination of New Jersey senators in the past. For example, only 2 people were nominated for the 2 senator positions, which is to say, it was predetermined. Even if there are extra people who participate in the nomination, they will be eliminated by Washington for various reasons. To put it bluntly, American democracy is still limited democracy. Pure, 100% democracy is impossible. Unless we can nominate a California senator candidate who is more competitive than Fremont and Gwynn before they officially take office, Milner said very disappointedly. Even if their New York consortium is willing to spend a huge amount of money to get 2 California senators, it is too late now. There is no direct telegraph route from California to Washington and New York. Even if the cost is not taken into account, the fastest way of communication is to send a letter to the telegraph office in Houston, Texas, and then the telegraph office in Houston will send the content of the letter to New York and Washington via wired telegraph. Milner's had to admit that Liang Zhao had a very good political vision. The 2 senator candidates supported by Liang Zhao were very suitable. Although Fremont was a political novice, he was born in a prominent family in Georgia, and his father-in-law was Thomas Hart Benton, a very powerful senator from Missouri. Moreover, Fremont himself was not a good-for-nothing dude. His adventure in the West opened up the Western Trail to California and made outstanding contributions to the expansion of the United States. During the Mexican-American War, Fremont even provided the military with a relatively accurate map of California. With the above conditions and Liang Zhao's financial support, Fremont was fully qualified to become a senator from California. As for Zhao Wen, his family background is not as prominent as Fremont's, but Zhao Wen is not a political novice. He has many years of experience as a congressman in Ohio and a good resume of working in government departments for more than 10 years. As long as there is enough financial support, he is fully qualified to be elected as a senator in California. Both of them perfectly avoided their New York consortium. Milners didn't know whether it was a coincidence or a plan that Liang Zhao had already completed. If it was a plan in advance, Liang Zhao would have started the plan at least 4 or 5 months ago, or even longer. At that time, California was not the only one dominated by Liang Zhao, but the era of Liang Zhao and Brannan competing for supremacy. If this was the case, Brannan's loss to Liang Zhao was not unfair at all. The vision and pattern of the two were not at the same level at all. John, where's the most suitable candidate for governor of California you mentioned? Where is he now? Orion placed his hopes on the candidate for governor of California that John and Leigh had mentioned. Although he currently knew nothing about this so-called most suitable candidate for governor of California. He is coming from the Oregon region. I think he will arrive soon. Maybe he has already arrived in San Francisco on Aspinwall's ship, John said, estimating the time it would take to get from the Oregon region to San Francisco. Then, John looked at Milners and asked, Milers, how much do you know about Liang Zhao? My grandfather often did business with the Chinese in his early years. He told me that the officials of the Qing dynasty were very smooth and more difficult to contact than the merchants of the Qing dynasty. Is this Liang Zhao from an official family of the Qing dynasty? John recalled the scene when he first met Liang Zhao. This guy let his creditors delay him for more than an hour, wearing out his patience, and only came out to meet him when he was very tired. As a result, John almost forgot the content of the conversation he had prepared in advance. People are often careless when they are tired. John remembered clearly that Liang Zhao's English was very fluent. His grandfather also told him that many merchants in Guangzhou, China, were very proficient in English because they traded with the British East India Company for many years. At that time, John also subconsciously believed that Liang Zhao should be born in a merchant family in Guangzhou, and did not conduct an in-depth investigation of Liang Zhao's life experience. Thank God, John, you finally got it and asked a meaningful question, Milners said. According to the information I collected, Liang Zhao was indeed born in an official family. Chinese immigrants in California also talked about Liang Zhao's identity with great relish, and even took pride in it. I heard that his grandfather was a secretary in the capital of the Qing dynasty, but unfortunately, I don't know much about the official system of the Qing dynasty. Officials in the capital. John's expression gradually became serious. I don't know what this official position does specifically, but my grandfather told me that local officials in the Qing dynasty are particularly afraid of officials from the central government. Even if they are small officials in the capital, they have to work hard to curry favor with them. Moreover, these officials look down on us, and are more arrogant than the British. They always look high and mighty and call us barbarians. Our trade with the Qing dynasty is nothing more than a kind of charity for us barbarians in the eyes of these arrogant officials. If that's the case, it makes sense. Milner seemed to have suddenly realized something. The population of the Qing dynasty is dozens of times that of the United States. I learned from the newspaper that they select officials through examinations, and the admission rate is lower than that of Harvard University. Those who can become officials in the Qing dynasty must be very knowledgeable, and their children must have been well educated. Milner seemed to understand why all the Chinese in California were in awe of Liang Zhao. Since he has such a good background, why did he come to California? What's the difference between coming to this hellhole and being a prisoner exiled to Australia by the British? Orion complained. Didn't we come to California from New York for gold? John also faced up to this difficult opponent and gave Liang Zhao a positive evaluation. Maybe he is a person with aspirations like us. There are not many people who can arouse Milner's interest, and he also agrees with John's point of view. If we are not competitors, I would like to sit down with him for a drink and chat. Chapter 102. This is the brand effect. San Francisco is rising at an alarming rate, and the whole city is full of vitality. Because of gold, every day there are ships from all over the world, either loaded with goods or loaded with gold diggers, entering the port of San Francisco, injecting fresh blood into the city. For this emerging city, people from different places have different names for her. Americans call it San Francisco, which is the most official name. Mexicans and countries and regions of former Spanish colonies stubbornly call the city Yelva Buena. Because 4 years ago, it was a small fishing village called Yelva Buena in Mexico. No one would have thought that just 4 years later, this small fishing village would become the largest city on the west coast of the United States, without a doubt. Chinese immigrants have the most vivid name for this city, because the name San Francisco is very difficult for Chinese to pronounce. So they simply transliterated the name of the city and called it San Francisco. But this simple transliterated name always feels strange to Chinese people, and soon the more vivid and appropriate name Jinshan spread among Chinese immigrants. The simple image and attractive name of Jinshan gradually replaced San Francisco. It was passed on by word of mouth among Chinese immigrants and even brought back to their hometown on the other side of the Pacific Ocean, attracting more Chinese to come here with the dream of getting rich. Brand new buildings rose from the ground with commercial streets and civic squares as the center. The modular and lightweight buildings let the gold diggers who had just arrived in California see what California speed is. I am afraid that in the whole of America, only California has the construction speed of buildings measured in days. Because the gold diggers in California are very busy and have no spare time to build buildings, but they have gold. Countless large and small construction companies and construction teams were established. As long as you have enough gold, they can build a brand new house for you in 40 days or even more than 30 days. If the construction company promises you a construction period of less than 30 days, then you have to be careful, because most of the houses they build for you are shoddy buildings. According to the most authoritative local newspaper, the California Daily, on September 6, 1850, this newspaper has published 9 news about shoddy buildings this month. The poor Wilson family had just happily moved into their new home, ready to welcome a new life, but the tragic incident of the house collapse occurred less than 24 hours after they moved in. The Wilsons were unfortunately killed by the collapsed beams, but fortunately, their 8-year-old child was still alive, thanks to the timely rescue of the poor child from the rubble by the fire department staff. If you want to build a new house, it is recommended that you contact Mr. Liang's California Construction Company, which is the largest and most reliable construction company in California. Not only are they efficient, but so far, no accident has occurred in any of the buildings built by the company. The only disadvantage is that their asking price is higher than that of other construction companies. If you have limited funds, you can contact Vanderbilt Construction Company, which is a construction company that was established not long ago, but their reputation and service are good. And the president of the construction company is Mr. Cunning, the son of Commodore Vanderbilt. Construction companies established by Chinese immigrants are also trustworthy. So far, there are few negative news about Chinese construction companies. Connie, where did you get the money to start a construction company? The advertising space in the California Daily is not cheap, right? Liang Zhao, who had returned to Jinshan City after the bandit suppression operation, was browsing the news in the study room. I got it from the casino. Connie, who was standing behind Liang Zhao, had a brand new look. He answered Liang Zhao's question calmly. While I was suppressing bandits, you went to gamble again? As expected, once a gambler, you will be a gambler for life. You are really a dog that can change its nature. Liang Zhao put down the newspaper with an angry look on his face. You misunderstood me. Do you remember the clothes Elizabeth prepared for me? Connie explained hurriedly. I remember, but what does this have to do with the money you got to start a construction company? Of course it has something to do with it. Elizabeth sewed a $10,000 bill in the pocket of one of the shirts. At this point, Connie's nose was sour. Elizabeth has so much money? Didn't you say that your father is very stingy with you brothers and sisters? Liang Zhao remembered that Elizabeth had told him that their monthly pocket money was only $12. Of course, $12 is a lot of money for ordinary people. Griffin's soldiers only get $8 a month, and the monthly salary of ordinary engineers in the East is only $15. But in California, where prices are extremely high, $12 is really just pocket money. The purchasing power of $12 in California is very limited, and it can barely support a person's relatively tight life in California for 4 or 5 days. I think this is what Elizabeth asked my father for on my behalf. Connie wiped his eyes and continued, Your Bank of America cannot exchange Citibank's dollar drafts, so I could only try my luck in the casino to see if anyone was willing to accept Citibank's drafts. In the end, that vampire Stanford exchanged my $10,000 bank draft for $6,000 in California gold coins. That guy Stanford is really black-hearted. Liang Zhao could not help but sigh, and then he pointed to the news of the collapsed house in the newspaper and warned Connie, "As long as you don't delay your job here, I don't object to you opening a construction company, but I don't want your construction company to appear in the negative news in the newspaper. Understand, the fact that Connie could learn from him to open a construction company shows that he is not hopeless and his brain is not stupid. I'm looking forward to working for you. I can learn a lot more from working for you than from a business school. My current construction company is not very large, so I can still handle it. It won't affect my job." Connie now understood why Jones, the president of Bank of America, wanted to return to Liang Zhao to be his assistant, and why his father valued a young man who was about the same age as him. "Don't you hate your father? Why does your construction company still use the Vanderbilt family name?" Liang Zhao teased. "You told me that the name of the Vanderbilt family is worth a fortune. This is a brand effect. It's a waste not to use it," Connie said. While Liang Zhao was talking to Connie, Hu Jinshan walked in and reported to Liang Zhao, "Mr. Liang, Mr. Jerwin wants to see you. Is Mr. Jerwin in Jinshan? Please invite Mr. Jerwin in." Liang Zhao asked Hu Jinshan to invite Jerwin in quickly. "I'll go prepare a pot of hot tea for you and Mr. Jerwin. I think you must have a lot to talk about." Connie followed Hu Jinshan out of the study. Chapter 103, Texas Rage. Liang Zhao stood by the window of the study, looking down at the city below. In his previous life, he had been to San Francisco several times on business trips. He looked at the empty Golden Gate Strait. Without San Francisco's iconic building, the Golden Gate Bridge, he always felt that the Golden Gate Bay was missing something. Build a Golden Gate Bridge? He was not the first person to have this idea. 2 years ago, when the gold rush just started, someone proposed to build a bridge across the Golden Gate Strait to connect the two sides. But this idea was too bold and avant-garde, and it became a laughingstock for a while. In 1850, the annual output of steel in the United States was less than 10,000 tons, and the annual output of pig iron was less than 600,000 tons. In the 1930s, the United States consumed more than 800,000 tons of steel and took 4 years to build the Golden Gate Bridge. In other words, if you want to build the Golden Gate Bridge, regardless of other factors, with the current steel production in the United States, it will take at least 80 years to get the steel needed to build the Golden Gate Bridge. Before the Second Industrial Revolution, it was nothing short of a fool's dream to want to carry out such a huge project. Even the British Empire, the world's first industrial power at that time, might not have the strength to build a bridge across the Golden Gate Bay. During this period, the main bridges in the United States were still brick and stone bridges. Mr. Liang, long time no see. Jerwin walked into the study and came to Liang Zhao. "Jerwin, how great it would be if we could build a bridge across the Golden Gate Strait. This bridge would definitely become a landmark building in San Francisco." Liang Zhao withdrew his eyes from the Golden Gate Strait. "Mr. Liang, you are dreaming. If we can build the bridge across the Golden Gate Strait, it will be a miracle in the history of bridges and even the history of industry in the world." Jerwin felt that Liang Zhao's idea was a bit unrealistic. If Jerwin didn't know Liang Zhao, he would definitely think that Liang Zhao was a complete lunatic and a dreamer. "Everything is possible. Sit down, Mr. Jerwin." Liang Zhao made a gesture to invite him to sit down, and the two sat on the sofa and prepared to start talking. Connie brought a pot of hot tea into the study, poured a cup of tea for Liang Zhao and Jerwin respectively, and reminded them at the same time, "The tea is quite hot, be careful of burns." "Gentlemen, is this your new servant or assistant?" Jerwin pointed at Connie and asked curiously. He always felt that Connie looked familiar, as if he had seen him somewhere, but also as if he had not seen him before. "New assistant," Liang Zhao said without hesitation. "Your assistant looks very much like Mr. Vanderbilt. I visited Mr. Vanderbilt when I passed by Texas." Jerwin seemed to suddenly remember something and stroked his forehead and said, no wonder he felt that Liang Zhao's new hand looked familiar and had seen him somewhere. It turned out that this new assistant looked very much like Mr. Vanderbilt. "He is Connie, the son of Commodore Vanderbilt. How could he not look like him?" Liang Zhao smiled. "Mr. Vanderbilt's son is your assistant." Jerwin's eyes widened and he almost dropped his jaw in shock. "Connie, introduce yourself to Mr. Jerwin." "No, it should be to Senator Jerwin." Liang Zhao said to Connie. "Hello, Senator, nice to meet you. My name is Cornelius Jeremiah Vanderbilt." Cornelius introduced himself to Gwen briefly. "Hello, Cornelius." Gwen shook hands with Cornelius, and he still had an incredible expression on his face. "Gwen, I saw a news in the newspaper that the territorial dispute between Texas and New Mexico has not been resolved." Liang Zhao pays much more attention to Texas than other states. In terms of geographical location, Texas is the state closest to California among all the states that have been established in the United States. In terms of interests, as a state that has just joined the United States, many of California's interests are consistent with Texas. It really hasn't been resolved. Mr. Peter Hansborough Bell of Texas is not satisfied with the compromise. Texas's troops stationed in New Mexico have not been completely withdrawn to Texas. The two sides are still very tense. "This is what Mr. Vanderbilt told me." Jerwin took a sip of tea to moisten his throat and continued. "Congress wants to annex 324,000 square kilometers of land originally belonging to Texas to the New Mexico region, and Texas will receive $10 million as compensation. If I were the governor of Texas, I would not agree to this loss-making deal." Liang Zhao could understand Governor Bell's feelings. Texas is really too big, more than 1 million square kilometers. Congress and President Fillmore's cabinet may have allocated 324,000 square kilometers of land in northwestern Texas to the New Mexico region for the purpose of balancing the states. After all, a state that is too large is not conducive to the unification of the United States, Jerwin said. The new cabinet was soft on the outside but strong on the inside. Although the new cabinet spared no effort to mediate the compromise, all members of the new cabinet firmly supported the unification of the United States and would never allow any state to secede from the territory of the United States. You can't just secede Texas. The free states in the North have developed economies, and they don't pay more taxes than the southern states. As far as I know, the taxes paid by the southern slave states account for 80% of the federal government's fiscal revenue. Liang Zhao spoke up for Texas. Congress and the government clearly favored the North. There's nothing we can do about it. The United States needs to maintain stability. And if the United States wants to be strong, it must develop industry. American industrial products cannot compete with the British and French. In order to protect its own industry, in addition to raising tariffs, the government also gives tax breaks to northern factories, but government agencies must have sufficient funds to maintain operations. Jerwin stopped there. Liang Zhao was so smart that he should understand what he meant. This is a louse on the monk's head. It is obvious that the United States wants to use the scissors gap between the northern industry and commerce and the southern plantation economy to develop the northern industry. The United States does not have as vast colonies as Britain to pluck wool and suck blood to develop local industries, so it reaches out to the slave states in the South. But the problem is that the slave states in the South are also part of the United States of America, not colonies of the United States. The United States cannot treat the southern states like colonies. In fact, the factory owners in the northern states have long regarded the slave states in the South as their actual colonies. Not only do they lie on the slave states unscrupulously and suck blood, they also pull the banner of humanitarianism and stand on the moral high ground to condemn the barbarity of slavery in the southern slave states. It can be said that they are both in power and in opposition. The factory owners in the North only care whether their factories can make more profits to expand their factories and recruit more workers. They don't care about the feelings of the people in the southern states at all. The slave states in the South made sacrifices for the industrialization of the North, but the South not only did not get compensation and rights that matched the sacrifices, but was further weakened by the North. Congress and the federal government have been biased and have not treated the problem equally, which inevitably chilled the hearts of the southern states. No matter how clever Fillmore and his cabinet's Tai Chi tactics are, they are only a temporary solution and not a fundamental solution. Sooner or later, the war between the North and the South will break out. After all, the northern and southern states of the United States have parted ways and chosen different paths since the founding of the country. As the saying goes, people with different paths cannot work together. If they don't even take the same path, how can they be of one mind and one heart and work together? Although the path chosen by the North is correct, industrialization is the only way to make America strong and big and complete the grand plan of catching up with France and surpassing Britain. But while industrializing, Shouldn't the factory owners and tycoons in the North consider the feelings of the southern slave states and be more gentle in their attitude and means towards the southern slave states? This is not a long-term solution. You said that Governor Bell did not withdraw all the troops stationed in New Mexico back to Texas. I guess the $10 million promise to Texas has not arrived, Liang Zhao said. As far as I know, Governor Bell is not an unreasonable person. He admired Governor Bell's courage to confront the federal government head-on. Texas is connected to the railway network of the United States. Bell's deployment to New Mexico not only had to guard against the local armed forces in New Mexico, but also had to respond to military threats from the North at any time. Of course, Liang Zhao also had Bell's courage, but he relied on his understanding of history, California's closed geographical environment, and inconvenient transportation conditions to have such courage. It is not easy for the federal government to deploy large-scale troops to California. If a protracted war is involved in California, the cost is no less than fighting another half of the Mexican War. America, which has just experienced a war, needs to recuperate at this time and will not want to provoke a war in the short term, whether it is a foreign war or a civil war. Unless the president is President Taylor, who just died suddenly. This guy was full of confidence during the Mexican-American War and once made a bold statement to annex the entire Mexico. It can be seen that his political level is worrying. Indeed, Texas requires a one-time compensation of $10 million. While Congress and the government advocate installment payment on the grounds of financial constraints, Zhao nodded and continued. Originally, Congress and the president had no plan to form a new infantry regiment in California. You need to thank 3 people for being able to become an Army colonel this time. The 5 recommended updates have been completed. Thank you for the 500 rewards from Bai Li, the 100 rewards from Aquarius Fengxiang, the 100 rewards from Bai Jiahui, the 100 rewards from Mi Huijin, and special thanks to Yimin Wima for the 10,000 rewards. If the cumulative rewards exceed 10,000 Kidian coins, one more update will be added, and Yimin Wima's 10,000 rewards will add another update. These 2 more updates will be completed as free chapters for the public period. Thank you for your support. Finally, please read and vote. Thank you everyone. Chapter 104 Preparations for State Establishment. Colonel Griffin, Governor Bell, and you and Mr. Fremont? In addition to the above 3, perhaps I should also thank the Mexican government, Liang Zhao said after a little thought. He guessed that it was Colonel Griffin who repeatedly applied to the War Department to return home. The friction between the local gentry represented by Governor Bell in Texas and the New Mexico region, and the minor frictions on the U.S.-Mexico border. These factors combined to promote Liang Zhao to serve as an Army colonel to prepare for the California Infantry Regiment. Of course, there is no free lunch in the world, and Liang Zhao is still clear about this truth. Congress and the federal government asked him to serve as a colonel to prepare for the California Infantry Regiment, hoping that he could share some of the border defense pressure for Colonel Mason stationed on the U.S.-Mexico border, so that Colonel Mason can free up his hands to deter the local armed forces in Texas. Very correct, but your appointment as an American Army colonel is mainly due to Mr. Fremont, and my role in it is minimal, Zhao said. President Fillmore originally wanted Mr. Fremont to be responsible for the preparation and formation of the California Infantry Regiment and to serve as the commander of the regiment. After all, Mr. Fremont had already served in the Army for many years and was the most suitable candidate for the commander of the California Infantry Regiment, Mr. Fremont declined. Liang Zhao asked. Fremont should have his own ideas. Besides, the Army was Fremont's sad place. It was reasonable that Fremont was unwilling to serve as the commander of the California Infantry Regiment. As you said, Zhao nodded, Mr. Fremont wanted to continue his exploration career after California became a state. So he recommended you to the president, Mr. Fremont wanted to explore a railway line from California to the eastern region, Liang Zhao guessed. Fremont had tried to explore a railway line from California to the eastern United States many times before he met Liang Zhao. It was just a pity that Fremont did not succeed. You two always have the same ideas, Zhao said with emotion. Mr. Fremont is a very courageous man. When we were in Washington, I was discouraged and ready to give up. But I persisted with the encouragement of Mr. Fremont. He remembered the time when he and Fremont were lobbying in Washington. Where is the money for the establishment of the California Infantry Regiment? It takes a lot of money to establish an infantry regiment, and there are also soldiers' salaries, weapons and equipment, and bedding and other supplies. These are not small expenses. Liang Zhao was a little looking forward to how much military funds Congress would approve for him, but he was soon disappointed. You need to recruit personnel for the infantry regiment yourself. The salary will be paid starting next year. The salary subsidy for each soldier is the same as other infantry regiments, which is $8.30 a month. As for weapons and various equipment, part of it will be paid by the federal government, and the rest may need to be solved by you at your own expense. After all, the federal government has been in financial difficulties in recent years, and it also has to repay the war loans owed to Britain and France during the Mexican-American War, Zhao said somewhat embarrassedly. But the War Department has prepared a brand new colonel uniform for you. The uniform and the letter of commission are in the hands of the War Department investigator. I think he will come to see you soon after meeting Colonel Griffin. It seems that for the set of colonel uniforms, I need to pay a lot of dollars. Liang Zhao smiled helplessly. Congress and the government are too stingy. In addition to the military pay of $8.30 per soldier per month, the rest of the promises are likely to be empty checks, and he will most likely have to pay for it himself. And the salary of $8.30 per month cannot support a soldier in California. Griffin's troops are a lesson. However, as long as it is authorized by the War Department's letter of commission in Congress, Liang Zhao does not want to care too much about other aspects. He is not a fool. His own army is naturally firmly in his own hands. He will not let the federal government get an infantry regiment for free. Liang Zhao's eyes stayed on the news about the shoddy construction in the California Daily. California now not only needs his personal strength to maintain operation, but also urgently needs a government to restrain these illegal companies and speculators. Mr. Zhao, besides being a congressman in Ohio, what other positions have you held before? Liang Zhao asked Zhao. Except for being a secretary to the deputy governor for a period of time, I have worked in some insignificant positions the rest of the time. Zhao said that although he had a rich political resume, he rarely held important positions in core departments. This is why he came to California to look for opportunities. Since Congress has passed a bill to establish California as a state, I think California should hold elections as soon as possible and set up a government team in California. I hope you can serve as Secretary of State to organize the first election in the state, Liang Zhao said. Regardless of the outcome of the discussion on the land grant by the Mexican government in Congress, he has made plans and preparations for the worst. The most important thing at present is to set up a government team in California. I have done similar work in Ohio before. This time I hurried back to California from Washington for the election of California's establishment as a state. But I am worried about two problems now, Zhao said. Which two problems? Liang Zhao asked. The first problem is that elections require a lot of financial support. I will find a way to solve the problem of funds. It's not a big problem. The second problem is the Eastern Consortium, especially the consortium from New York. I am worried that the New York Consortium will intervene in the California election. After all, you, Mr. Fremont, and I all hope that California will exist as an independent state. We don't want California to become a place for Eastern consortiums to make money. This problem is what Zhao is most worried about. Once the state legislature, state government, and state court are filled with a large number of people from the Eastern Consortium, California will be restricted in whatever it does in the future and will be influenced and constrained by the Eastern Consortium. This is what Zhao does not want to see. It is also what Liang Zhao and Fleet are unwilling to accept. What you said makes a lot of sense. California should be run by Californians. Let me solve this matter. You just need to concentrate on doing your job well. Liang Zhao thought for a while and said. Most of the other consortiums reached an agreement with him to leave Sacramento and go deep inland to find new gold-producing areas. The only thing that needs to be guarded against is the New York Consortium that is still in the Sacramento area. The New York Consortium is now banding together for warmth and concentrating on mining gold in one mining area. The personnel are very concentrated, so it is not difficult to prevent them from intervening in the California elections. Chapter 105 The Tailor and the Executioner. Is the War Department investigator born in a noble family and has seen big scenes? Before Zhao left, Liang Zhao asked him the last question. He will choose how to receive the War Department investigator based on his background. Previously, the reason why he chose to use the California Star, that is, the 145-pound natural gold nugget, to connect with former President Fillmore was not because he knew the specific date of death of former President Taylor. Neither Taylor nor Fillmore was a famous president in American history, and Liang Zhao did not know their birth and death dates. The most important reason why Liang Zhao chose to connect with Fillmore was that he valued Fillmore's poor background. Generally speaking, politicians from humble backgrounds are often more corrupt than those from wealthy families. This was the case in the Qin dynasty, and it was also the case in the United States. As for those politicians from wealthy families, they have more sophisticated and obscure means of corruption. You mean Higbee? He is not from a noble family. His father, grandfather, and he are all tailors. He was lucky enough to make a good-looking uniform for the former Minister of War, so he was able to work in the Ministry of War. Jerwin stood up and said with disdain. He was an investigator for Griffin, but a commissioner for you. If I'm not mistaken, Colonel Griffin will bleed a lot this time. He was a tailor before he joined the Ministry of War? This is good news for Liang Zhao. A tailor is much easier to serve than the sons of wealthy merchants. The saying "a small official with a big air" is very appropriate for Higbee. I have gone all the way from Washington to this remote place called California. In addition to delivering the military uniform and letter of appointment prepared by the War Department, I also need to write an evaluation report on you at the request of Minister Conrad. After all, your appointment was made very hastily. Higbee, with a stern face, emphasized the important words Minister Conrad and evaluation report, fearing that Liang Zhao did not hear clearly. Give my regards to Minister Conrad. Thank you for your hard work, Mr. Higbee. According to what I have heard, many officials in the War Department like to sit in their offices and talk big. It is rare to find officials like you who are willing to go to California for field investigation. Liang Zhao greeted him with a smile. His words made Higbee feel like spring breeze, and his impression of this young man changed greatly. Higbee no longer had a stern face. I heard that you just wiped out a group of bandits. This is a great achievement. If the situation is true, I think no one is more suitable than you to be the sheriff and army colonel of California. This time, Higbee emphasized the word if. Liang Zhao warmly welcomed Higbee. Although this bald tailor was an annoying little man, who made this little man a close friend of the Minister of War, Mr. Conrad? He didn't want the position of army colonel in his hand to fly away because of some trivial issues. What's more, he also hoped that Higbee could say a word for him in front of the Minister of War and get some weapons and equipment to California. After a big meal, Liang Zhao took the bald fat man to the casino. Stanford was very good at handling things. He personally served Higbee at the gambling table and made him smile. After losing $8,000 worth of gold to Higbee, Stanford looked at Liang Zhao. And Liang Zhao nodded slightly to indicate that it was almost done. Investing $8,000 in a small character like Higbee was enough to show respect to him. $8,000 in this era was enough to corrupt the weak-willed ministerial-level officials of the United States. Higbee was satisfied. The $8,000 he gained made him feel that his trip was worthwhile. Moreover, he won the $8,000 in the casino in a fair and square manner, and he was not afraid of impeachment from his colleagues. Next to the largest casino in San Francisco is the largest brothel in San Francisco. This industrial layout was established during the Brannan period. At the instruction of Liang Zhao, Stanford helped the drunk Higbee to the brothel next door. Let me introduce you. This is the most suitable candidate for the governor of California that I mentioned to you all, Mr. Peter Hartman Burnett, who is also the governor of the California Territory. In Sacramento, in the camp of the New York Consortium, John enthusiastically introduced Burnett to his companions. Many Chinese historical materials in later generations regarded Peter Hartman Burnett as the first governor of California, and openly marked Burnett's term of office as 1849 to 1851. In fact, this is wrong. California was officially established in September 1850, so how could there be a governor in 1849? Regarding Burnett's position, a more accurate name should be the governor of California Territory. After the United States had overseas colonies, the more specific name of this position was the territorial governor. In another time and space, the establishment of California before the Civil War was only a nominal establishment of the state. In fact, the core positions in California were controlled by the Eastern Consortium. The first democratically elected governor of California who truly held real power was Leland Stanford, who took office when the Civil War broke out, 1861. This is the man who is now running the black industry in California for him. I heard that Mr. Burnett is a Democrat and has political experience. So, Mr. Burnett is indeed the most suitable candidate for the governor of California. Milners looked at Burnett from top to bottom. Although Burnett was well dressed, he looked very rough and fierce, with a pair of vulture-like blue eyes full of murderous intent. This image did not please Milners, so Milners frowned and said, "Mr. Burnett, since you are the governor of California Territory, where have you been before? Not only did you fail to fulfill your responsibility to protect us American citizens, California is now in such chaos, and there are so many barbaric Chinese. You have an unshirkable responsibility. Gentlemen, please listen to me carefully." Burnett sat down and wiped the mud off his leather boots. His leather boots were made of Indian scalps, one of which was from the leader of the Yurok tribe, which was very precious. After wiping the mud off his leather boots, Burnett explained to Milners the reason: Indians are rampant in Northern California and Oregon. For more than a year, I have been committed to eliminating the Indian savages in the two places. As he spoke, Burnett ordered several shackled Indian captives to come in with a pile of scalps. These are the results of my more than a year, and they are strong proof that I have maintained law and order in California and even in Oregon. If I hadn't cleared out the Indians, the gold diggers in California would not be able to gain a foothold in California, let alone find gold here. Okay, I get it. Milner waved his hand in disgust. Take these bloody things out quickly. I don't want to see these things. Milners asked Burnett to take out the Indian scalps quickly. He couldn't bear to see these things. He didn't understand what kind of deep hatred Burnett had with the Indians that made this guy spend more than a year in the deep mountains and old forests to slaughter Indians. Even John thought that Burnett's move was too barbaric. Although John didn't like Burnett's image, he still decided to nominate Burnett to run for governor of California. I heard from the miners around me that they will vote for a doctor named Robinson for governor. He is just a doctor and has no political experience. He is not suitable to be elected governor of California. Burnett, we will spare no effort to support you. I hope you won't let us down. It is my honor that you are willing to support me. I promise you that as long as I am elected governor, I will scalp the Chinese just like I scalped the Indians. These nasty guys have the same nasty skin color as the Indians, Burnett promised the representatives of the New York Consortium. The Liang Zhao you mentioned will also be the raw material for making my new leather boots. Burnett, let's get elected governor first and then talk about these things. Our current situation is not optimistic, and we must find a way to get enough votes. Milner said in a deep voice, the Chinese in California are all naturalized citizens, and the methods used to deal with the Indians do not apply to them. This chapter makes up for yesterday's update. Chapter 106 Army Colonel. In Tingtao Garden, Liang Zhao changed into the uniform of a colonel of the United States Army. The yellow shoulder epaulets on his shoulders were embroidered with an eagle with its wings spread, which looked very majestic. This was the shoulder epaulet that only colonels of the United States Army were qualified to wear. The only flaw was that Liang Zhao was stronger than before and a little taller, so he felt that the uniform was a little ill-fitting and tight. But these were all minor problems that did not cause any harm. Liang Zhao put on his army saber, and standing next to him were Deng Yan, who had just been appointed as a lieutenant colonel of the California Infantry Regiment, and Major Elvis. But the two of them did not have uniforms issued by the War Department, and they had to spend their own money to customize a uniform. Elvis was still wearing a washed and faded British Army captain's uniform. In order to become a major in the United States, Elvis also gave up his nationality of his motherland and became a naturalized American. As for Isaac, Liang Zhao had no intention of recruiting him because of his mediocre ability, although Isaac told Liang Zhao that he hoped he could become an officer of the California Infantry Regiment like Elvis and continue to serve Liang Zhao. But Liang Zhao decided to fire Isaac when the employment contract expired. I heard that a guy named Burnett threatened to cut off my scalp to make boots. Liang Zhao touched his head and put on his military cap. He was curious about how twisted and perverted a person's psychology was to wear boots made of the same scalp. Anyway, he didn't have the courage to wear such boots. You are just a clown. You are now an American colonel with 350 professional soldiers, not those Indian natives with backward equipment. Elvis handed Liang Zhao a holster. He had heard about Burnett's deeds of organizing a group of desperados to massacre Indians, but he didn't think Burnett had the ability to peel off Liang Zhao's scalp. Elvis believed that these professional soldiers he trained personally were not for show. Have the arms for the Pomo and Maidu been delivered? Liang Zhao took the holster and asked Deng Yan beside him. They have been delivered. The leaders of the two tribes expressed their great pleasure in helping you, Deng Yan replied. You rescued their people. To express their gratitude, They also gave us 50 horses, the Indian tribes in California, Maidu, Pomo, Yurok, Hoopa, and even the Kuss and Klamath tribes in Oregon have a blood feud with Burnett, the fanatical genocide. Liang Zhao believed that they would still be willing to lend a hand to such a small favor as asking them to attack the New York Consortium camp. Let's go. We are now American soldiers and have the responsibility to protect the personal safety of American citizens. Liang Zhao tidied up his clothes and boarded the small steamer to the Sacramento area with 200 fully armed soldiers. Under Jerwin's organization, the preparations for the election in California are about to be completed. The date of the governor's election is approaching, and local newspapers of all sizes are promoting Robinson. Whether in the streets or in taverns and tea houses, people were talking about this. As Liang Zhao expected, Robinson was very popular in California. In addition to Chinese immigrants, local white immigrants all expressed their support for Robinson to be the governor of California. Chinese immigrants were not opposed to Robinson being the governor of California. Robinson had a good reputation among Chinese immigrants. It was just that Chinese immigrants hoped that Liang Zhao would be the governor of California. The representatives of the New York Consortium in the Sacramento area were deeply disturbed by this, and they decided to personally come forward to vote for Burnett. The recent sneak attack on their camp by the Indians made the representatives of these New York consortiums exhausted physically and mentally. Just as they were discussing preparing to go to San Francisco, where there were more voters, to canvass for votes, a burst of dense gunfire rang out outside their camp. They were so scared that they hid with their heads in their hands. Are the Indians so bold now? They dare to sneak attack our camp in broad daylight. Milners pulled out the 6-shot revolver from his waist, ready to fight at any time. Burnett, don't you often brag about being good at killing Indians? I'm ordering you to go out and kill those Indians now. Glover, who looked panicked, placed his hopes on Burnett. Mr. Glover, but I only have more than 20 followers now. Judging from the gunshots, there are at least more than 200 Indians attacking us, Burnett evaded. In the past, more than 200 Indians were nothing to him, but these Indians were equipped with muskets. It was the colonel. Thank God, the colonel drove away those Indians. Burnett's followers saw the American officer coming out of the smoke. When the tall officer approached, he saw the colonel's epaulets on the officer's shoulders clearly. He happily reported the good news to the frightened consortium representatives. In fact, the so-called driving away the Indians was just Liang Zhao firing a gun to notify the Indians wandering around the camp to retreat. Colonel? Colonel Griffin is here? John had an incredible expression on his face. According to his understanding, Colonel Griffin usually refused to leave the military fortress. How could he come to Sacramento? The other representatives of the consortium were also full of suspicion, until Liang Zhao, wearing a colonel's uniform, appeared in front of them. The suspicious expressions of the consortium representatives disappeared one after another, replaced by a look of astonishment. Liang Zhao? Colonel? The intelligence network of the New York Consortium in California was far less reliable and efficient than Liang Zhao's intelligence network. They did not receive the news that Liang Zhao became a colonel in the U.S. Army. Chinese immigrants and colonels in the U.S. Army seem to be two completely unrelated words. Excuse me, gentlemen. The California Sheriff, the Colonel Commander of the California Infantry Regiment, extends his sincere greetings to you. Liang Zhao held his head high and walked into the tent of the New York Consortium accompanied by officers, and sent sincere greetings to these frightened New York gentlemen. Milners lifted the curtain at the tent opening and saw that the tent was full of Chinese soldiers standing in neat formation. These soldiers stood upright, no one looked around, and no one whispered. It was obvious that this was a disciplined army. Colonel Liang, what do you mean by this? Milners questioned. He had already vaguely guessed Liang Zhao's purpose. I am the Sheriff of California. It is my duty to ensure your safety, Liang Zhao said with a smile. I heard that banditry has been rampant in the Sacramento area recently. For your safety, I have specially transferred 2 infantry companies to protect you. By the way, I would like to remind you that from today on, these 2 infantry companies will hold military exercises nearby to deter the Indians. You know that these soldiers of mine are Chinese immigrants. They don't speak English. In order to avoid unnecessary misunderstandings and accidental injuries, please stay in the mining area honestly these days and don't go out. Liang Zhao's purpose couldn't be more obvious. The California election is imminent, and he wants to confine the people of their New York Consortium to the mining area in Sacramento. As for deterring the Indians, Milners had heard that Liang Zhao had a good relationship with the nearby Pomo and Maidu tribes. "Liang Zhao, you have no right to restrict our freedom." The furious Burnett was about to grab Liang Zhao's collar, but Deng Yen and Elvis beside Liang Zhao quickly took out the pistols that were twirling around in their waists and pointed them at Burnett. "Sir, are you going to attack an army colonel?" Liang Zhao said coldly. He had never seen Burnett, and he didn't know that the person who was going to grab his collar was Burnett, who wanted to scalp him to make leather boots. "Burnett, stay calm," John yelled at Burnett like he was scolding a servant. Although John was as angry as Burnett, he knew that it would be of no benefit for them to have a physical conflict with Liang Zhao. John thought for a long time and lowered his attitude. He said to Liang Zhao, "It's rare that Colonel Liang has taken such pains to ask us to stay in the camp, but if we can't leave the camp, we can't get enough food and supplies. I don't think Colonel Liang will watch the citizens of the United States starve to death, right?" Instead of arguing fearlessly with Liang Zhao, it is better to take the opportunity to ask for a batch of food and supplies. John believes that Liang Zhao will agree to his condition at this time. As for the California election, he decided to put pressure on Congress to deny the legitimacy of this California election. Appointing a Chinese as a colonel in the United States Army is also something that has never happened in the more than 70 years since the founding of the United States. It is also necessary for Congress to put pressure on Mr. President and ask Mr. President to withdraw his order. "Don't worry, you won't starve to death." Liang Zhao stared at Burnett coldly for a while, then turned and left the camp of the New York Tycoons. After Liang Zhao left, Burnett and representatives of other financial groups accused John of not giving in so easily, which was a loss of face for their New York nobles. "Do you still want to duel with Liang Zhao?" John said angrily. "There are 2 fully armed infantry companies standing around us. If anyone has the courage, go and duel with them." John did the right thing. This time, Milner stood on John's side. The kid finally learned his lesson. If you don't show up, the governor of California, the deputy governor, the secretary of state, and other positions will fall into their hands. If you still want California's gold, you should stop this election. They are trampling on American freedom." Seeing that he had no chance of becoming the governor of California, Burnett roared hysterically. "Burnett, please calm down. The bill for California's statehood was passed by Congress. We have no right to stop the election." Milner's face was very serious. He didn't want to look at Burnett anymore and turned to look at John. "John, maybe we should write to New York and Congressman Calhoun, asking them to put pressure on Congress to demand that California hold a new election." Milner's idea coincided with John's. He nodded and said, "I think so too. At this point, there is no better way." Chapter 107 California King. After the New York consortium was confined, Liang Zhao quickly returned to San Francisco. Before the election in California officially began, Liang Zhao and Robinson convened a Citizens Committee representative conference in San Francisco. The conference unanimously passed a resolution to reorganize the Citizens Committee and established a first local political party in California, the Citizens Party. Undoubtedly, Liang Zhao and Robinson served as chairman and vice chairman of the Citizens Party respectively. As a member of the Whig Party, Gu Wen could not hold any position in the Citizens Party. But Liang Zhao and Robinson still allowed Gu Wen to listen in. In this era in America, not everyone has the right to vote. Each state has relatively strict requirements for voters, which can also be said to be a threshold. For example, the threshold for voters in New York State is to own at least one property. And wealth is the most unstable thing in California. Almost everyone's wealth will fluctuate greatly tomorrow. For example, Liang Zhao, when he wakes up, his net worth can increase by tens of thousands of dollars. Of course, there are also people who are unlucky in the gold rush and lose all their wealth overnight. How to define whether a California citizen has the right to vote has become a big problem facing the Citizens Party. It is impossible to count the wealth of California citizens in a short period of time. The great fluctuation of wealth of California citizens is a problem. Another more realistic problem is that there is no census bureau in California at present. In the end, Liang Zhao proposed a practical solution, that is, as long as California citizens have American nationality, they can have the right to vote. This bold idea was quickly supported by most representatives of the Civic Party. After all, checking nationality is more convenient and faster than counting wealth. Some Civic Party members even think that this is an initiative that is more advanced than the eastern states. Liang Zhao's original intention of making this suggestion was not to consider whether this method is advanced, but because all Chinese immigrants in California have American nationality. However, many gold diggers from Europe and other regions who poured into California did not have American nationality. In this way, the proportion of Chinese voters will increase greatly and become an important political force in California. On the third day after the end of the conference, the election was held as scheduled, and the first to start was the governor's election. After the election began, the gold diggers who did not become American citizens in time could not help but beat their chests and stamp their feet, regretting it. The reason they regretted it was not because they did not have the right to vote, but because those who had the right to vote could use their votes to exchange for 10 pounds of flour or 5 pounds of beer. These things are not cheap in California. In the gubernatorial election, Robinson was successfully elected as the first governor of California with 93% support without any suspense. Liang Zhao's support rate for the vice governor was 5 percentage points higher than Robinson. Strauss, who had just returned to San Francisco, defeated Stanford by a narrow margin and was elected mayor of San Francisco. Stanford did not gain nothing. He became the state attorney general as he wished. Sutter was successfully elected mayor of Sacramento. Even Deng Wenchen in Los Angeles became the mayor of Los Angeles. So far, the three largest settlements in California, San Francisco, Sacramento, and Los Angeles, are all in Liang Zhao's hands. He is now the real king of California. After the election, Liang Zhao did not indulge in joy. He was not overwhelmed by the victory in front of him. He knew very well that he had not yet achieved a complete victory, and what would greet him next would be a storm from Congress. The consortium and nobles in New York would never be willing to give up and would inevitably launch a crazy counterattack. Congress and the federal government had no right to interfere in the affairs of the states, but that was for the more mature states in the East, and California was a new state with gold. In the eyes of the congressman, California, which had just been established, was as weak and vulnerable as a child who had just inherited a huge fortune. The flag of the United States rose slowly in the square of San Francisco, and California became the 31st star on the Stars and Stripes. Next to the Stars and Stripes, the state flag of California, the bear flag, was fluttering in the wind. The state flag retained the words of the California Republic from the Bear Flag Uprising in 1846. This uprising was led by Fremont, whose original idea was to follow the example of the Lone Star Republic, to separate California from Mexico and establish an independent new country in the California region. However, this idea was very unrealistic at the time, so Fremont gave up the idea of independence and announced that California would join the United States of America. The California Republic existed for only 25 days from its independence in June 1846 to its declaration of joining the United States in July 1846. Liang Zhao did not intend to put the words California Republic on the bear flag, and the words California Republic were also retained on the California flag of later generations. Because Californians believe that although the California Republic only existed for 25 days, this period of history is a very important period of California's history. Without the California Republic, there would be no California. Liang Zhao looked at the state flag of California with deep emotion, and then went to the military fort to hand it over to Griffin. Griffin had no attachment to California, and the guns and military supplies in the fort were left intact to Liang Zhao. It's just that Liang Zhao had to pay some gold for these things. Liang Zhao ordered an inventory of the military supplies in the fort. There were 1,280 rifles in stock alone, 18 cannons, and countless ammunition. However, most of these stockpile muskets were muzzle-loading smoothbore guns, and the cannons were also muzzle-loading smoothbore guns, which were not the most advanced weapons of this era. But it is better to have it than not to have it. With these weapons in stock, Liang Zhao can equip a full infantry regiment. Liang Zhao was pleased that although the United States occupied California only a few years ago, this military fortress that controls Jinshan Bay was not only well built, but also very strong. At the same time, thousands of miles away in Washington, Fremont walked into Congress with a trepidation. He thought that Zhou should have arrived in California by now, and Liang Zhao should have completed the election in California. The two senators from Texas greeted Fremont warmly, and then sat next to Fremont and talked to Fremont. Fremont was from Georgia, that is, a Southerner, and had participated in the Mexican-American War. This identity easily brought him closer to the two Texas senators. Today, Congress will have a final discussion on whether to accept the land grant from the Mexican government in California. The two Texas senators are also very concerned about the outcome of this meeting. The gentry in Texas have much more land grants from the Mexican government than in California. Although the 68-year-old Congressman Calhoun was terminally ill, he insisted on attending the meeting. Calhoun was pushed into the Congress in a wheelchair. The sick old man still had saliva at the corners of his mouth, and it was a question whether he could speak. But this did not prevent Calhoun from becoming the protagonist of the meeting. Almost all the congressmen focused their attention on Calhoun. Calhoun seemed to enjoy the feeling of being the center of attention, and a proud and satisfied smile appeared at the corners of his mouth. Chapter 108 Congress. Calhoun, a descendant of Irish and Scottish people, was already very popular in Congress at this time. He had served as Secretary of War for President Monroe, Secretary of State for President Taylor, and Vice President. If there was any regret in Calhoun's career, it was that he was not elected President of the United States. Calhoun, lying in a wheelchair, hummed a few times and looked at the thick speech and bill in his hands. His colleagues quickly understood what Calhoun meant. Since Mr. Calhoun could no longer give a passionate speech, Calhoun's speech was read by William Seward, a 49-year-old young politician from New York. The speech was long and boring, and all the 61 senators present, except Calhoun himself, were drowsy. After reading the speech, Seward took out a bill tucked under his armpit. "Gentlemen, Mr. Calhoun and I believe that since California is now a territory of the United States, the land donated by the Mexican government in California is naturally illegal. Only land approved by the Parliament and government at all levels of the country is legal. I suggest that the land donated by the Mexican government in California be taken back, and the gold mining area and all the land in California will be owned by the highest bidding company." Hearing this, the senators in the audience regained their spirits and agreed to this motion. Although the voting has not yet begun, from the attitudes of these senators, Fremont can already glimpse the result of this vote. Mr. Calhoun, as far as I know, after you married Mrs. Bruno, you shamelessly occupied the property of your wife and father-in-law. May I ask if these properties are also illegal? Although Calhoun is very glorious now, he was also a gigolo when he was young. The senators from Texas felt betrayed. Although the United States has annexed a large area of Mexican territory, most of these former Mexican territories are still sparsely populated territories. The only areas that have been established as states are Texas and California. They had already discussed this with Governor Bell and thought that they would stand on the side of California in this matter. The early immigrants in Texas had more land granted by the Mexican government than California. If gold or other resources were discovered under the land of Texas in the future, it is hard to guarantee that Congress would not recognize the legitimacy of these lands. Such unreasonable demands as today to take back the land. Facing the questioning of the Texas senator, Calhoun's face was very ugly and he was very angry. But Calhoun, who was seriously ill, could not refute it. It is well known that Mr. Calhoun is keen on charity. You have a good public image. I wonder if you use your own money for charity or your wife and father-in-law's money for charity. The Texas senator continued to attack Calhoun. Calhoun trembled all over, and his cloudy eyes stared at the two Texas senators. President Fillmore stopped the two Texas senators who were unreasonable, fearing that the seriously ill Calhoun would die in Congress. Although Fillmore also hated these old antiques who were in high positions but did nothing, he could not watch these old guys die in Congress. Mr. Fremont, do you have anything to say? President Fillmore asked Fremont. Gwen had returned to California, and Fremont was the only one left in Congress who could represent California. Fillmore wanted to hear Fremont's speech. Although he knew that Fremont's speech was useless. Fillmore was a veteran in the political arena, and he knew the relationship between these senators and the various financial aristocrats. At present, the American economy was depressed and the unemployment rate was high. Fillmore hoped to transfer part of the population in the eastern region to the west through the westward movement. And California was the most important part of the westward movement. Fillmore, who came from the bottom of society, knew that in order to maintain the stability of American society, the American government had to appease the emotions of the upper-class elites and could not completely ignore the voices of the lower-class people. He knew very well what the lower-class people needed, which was hope and room for advancement. Now the gold in California is the hope of these lower-class unemployed people. The gold in California was the hope of these lower middle-class people, because once they went to California and made a fortune by panning for gold, they could quickly complete class transition. The gold in California was gold in the eyes of these consortium representatives, but in Fillmore's eyes it was a painkiller to ease the discontent of the lower middle-class people. "Gentlemen, do you know what you are doing now?" Fremont stood up angrily, holding a land deed in his hand, which was also his last trump card. "You are illegally depriving private property. You are trampling on the Constitution of the United States. Have you ever considered the consequences of taking back these lands, Mr. Fremont? I think you are exaggerating." "What are the consequences of taking back these lands?" Seward disagreed. "These territories were won by the blood of American soldiers. It is not only reasonable and legal for us to take back these lands, but also to distribute these lands more reasonably, so as to better develop California and comfort the souls of those sacrificed soldiers in heaven." "Well said, Mr. Seward. Then may I ask if you will participate in the war against Mexico?" Fremont questioned Seward. No, Seward wanted to answer yes, but unfortunately, he did not participate in the Mexican-American War. Before the outbreak of the Mexican-American War, Seward even voted against the vote on whether to declare war on Mexico. "I participated. American immigrants in California also participated. The land you want to take back also has a part of them," Fremont said. "Even if you do not recognize the land gift from the Mexican government, the law stipulates that the unowned land in the West belongs to whoever develops it first. It is illegal for you to take back these lands. Unconstitutional. We can amend the Constitution." Calhoun, who was paralyzed in a wheelchair, used all his strength to spit out this sentence to stand up for Seward. "Congress certainly has the power to amend the Constitution." Fremont also admitted this, "but I wonder if you have ever thought about it. After the amendment of the Constitution, who would be willing to go to the wild land of the West to develop? Will the gold diggers and miners in California easily hand over their land? What consequences will it cause to take back their land?" "Fremont, what do you mean? Are you threatening Congress?" Seward tried to push Fremont to the opposite side of all senators. "I am also a member of Congress. How could I threaten Congress?" Fremont slapped the land contract with the seal of Congress on the podium. "This is a land contract in California. Some of the land in California was originally approved by Congress. There is also the seal of Congress on it. If Congress rashly takes back these owned lands and bids them for auction, I think it will damage the reputation of Congress. Please think carefully before voting. That's all I want to say." After that, Fremont sat down and took out 2 more land contracts with the seal of Congress and circulated them among the senators. The senators didn't expect that Fremont still had land contracts authorized by Congress. Seward's first reaction was that these land contracts were forged, but he thought it was impossible. No matter how brave Fremont was, he would not dare to forge the seal of Congress. Seward handed the land deed to Secretary of State Webster, pointed to the seal of Congress on the land deed and asked, "Mr. Webster, is this seal real?" Webster carefully checked the seal of Congress and gave a positive answer, "It is real." "Okay, everyone, let's start voting now." Fillmore announced that the vote on whether to reclaim the land in California would begin. This kind of thing was originally done by the vice president, but he took office in a hurry and had not had time to elect a vice president. Fortunately, Fillmore was originally a vice president and was already familiar with the process of this kind of thing. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 109 Fremont's Fury. Fremont sat in his seat anxiously waiting for the result of the vote. His heartbeat was very fast. Soon, the result of the vote was announced. 46 votes in favor, 11 votes against, and 4 abstentions. Fremont's heartfelt speech only won the sympathy of a few senators. In addition to Texas and a few Southern senators, the remaining votes against Fremont were almost all from new states in the West. The representatives of these new states do not have much say in Congress. The most powerful voice in Congress is still the old states in the East, especially the 13 founding states. This is the case in the Senate, which has a relatively balanced population, not to mention the House of Representatives, where the Eastern representatives account for the majority. Because the members of the House of Representatives are allocated according to the population of each state, the Eastern states have an inherent advantage. Fillmore could not help with this result. If Fremont could win more than 1/3 of the votes against, he could also use the veto power in the hands of the president to veto the bill. Unfortunately, Fremont did not even win 1/3 of the votes. Fillmore was also worried that the forced recovery of California's land would have more serious consequences. But the representatives of these consortiums in Congress don't care about these things. They only have gold and US dollars in their eyes. The bill to take back the land donated by the Mexican government in California has been passed. Fillmore announced the result in a sad tone. Even if this is a result he doesn't want to see, he can only accept it, because this is the rule of the American political game. Even if he is the president of a country, he can only act under the constraints of this rule. Fremont? I'm sorry. Fillmore walked off the stage and came to Fremont. He gently patted Fremont's shoulder and comforted him. He knew that this bill would cause great harm to a new state. After the bill was introduced, California's attraction to the people in the East would be greatly reduced, and California would become a paradise for the Eastern consortiums. Fillmore and Fremont were surrounded by cheering senators. This was a victory for them. They cheered for the victory in Congress. In the days to come, California's gold will not only flow into the pockets of the Eastern consortiums and nobles, but also into their pockets. Calhoun also showed a proud smile. He also knew that he had not much time left. This bill would be the last one in his life. Calhoun was very satisfied that he could put a perfect end to his political career. Mr. President, you should be happy about this. The successful passage of this bill is a good thing for the federal government. The income from the auction of California land will be used to fill the Treasury of the United States, Secretary of State Webster said to Fillmore. Fillmore sneered. He knew very well that the Secretary of State from New Hampshire seemed to be honest and upright, but in fact he was a hypocritical hypocrite. When Fillmore was still a lawyer, he personally gave money to Webster, who was already a prominent figure in the political arena at that time, in order to win a real estate lawsuit. But in the end, Fillmore still lost the case. Although it has been more than 20 years since this happened, he still remembers it clearly. Mr. Webster, how generous do you think these consortiums will be to the federal government? Fillmore said in a very indifferent tone. Since you insist on doing what you want, as a senator from California, I have to remind you that I, Fremont, will never accept this result. The people of California will not accept this result either. Fremont, in grief and indignation, stood up and walked to the podium, tearing Calhoun's speech and bill to pieces. If you want to take away the land of California, please step on the bodies of the people of California to take it. I will return to California and fight you to the end just like I fought against the Mexicans. After saying that, Fremont, with blurred vision, left the Congress. The senators in Congress did not take Fremont's words seriously. In their eyes, Fremont was just a newcomer in the political arena who spoke without restraint. A newcomer could not stir up much trouble, so they did not take Fremont's words seriously. I guess this guy must be from the South. I bet $5, it must be from the South. Only Southerners can be so barbaric, fighting at every turn, as if they want to declare war on the whole world. We Northerners will never have such an uncultured senator. Keep your voices down, Seward reminded the congressmen who were talking about Fremont. Fremont alone cannot represent the entire South. The congressman's eyes fell on the wheelchair pushed by Seward. Mr. Calhoun, who was slumped in the wheelchair, looked a little unhappy. They reacted and stopped talking about Southerners, because Mr. Calhoun's hometown was South Carolina. Although Mr. Calhoun's ancestors were also from the North, he was born and raised in South Carolina. After Fremont left, the two Texas senators also put on their hats and left Congress. Ron, I think we should send a telegram to Bell, after leaving Congress, a spy said to his companion Ron. I think so, Ron agreed. You should inform Mr. Bell to postpone the withdrawal of troops from New Mexico. Oh, damn, what New Mexico? Those places belong to Texas. If Californians are going to defend their land as Fremont said, it would be good news for them, the Texans. If Californians are strong enough, the annoying Guy Mason is likely to be transferred from the U.S.-Mexico border to California. In this way, the pressure on Texas will be much less. Whether out of sympathy or for the sake of Texas' own interests, they should stand on the side of California. Ron and a spy don't want Texas to be the next California. The news that Congress passed a bill to take back the land grant from Mexico and California was quickly transmitted to New York and major cities in the East by telegram. The aristocratic families and financial groups in New York had long anticipated the result. Wall Street even laid out a map of California, dividing the known and unknown gold-producing areas and all possible places into pieces with straight lines. The New York Consortium representatives, represented by William Backhouse Astor, also known as Astor Jr., pointed at the map of California, as if the whole of California was already a cake on their table, allowing them to share it. In order to pass the bill to take back the land donated by Mexico and California, their New York consortium contributed the most and should get the most and richest gold-producing areas. Mr. Vanderbilt, I heard that you and your short-sighted friends have invested a lot in California. Backhouse noticed that Vanderbilt, who was watching coldly from the side, was full of gloating in his words. I think your investment in California is going to go down the drain. If you are willing to join us and participate in the bidding for this land auction, we don't mind giving you some gold-producing areas. Buckhouse, you are just like your stingy father, a complete nuisance. Vanderbilt smiled faintly. I have the richest gold production in California, and Staten Mining Company can bring me tens of thousands of dollars in income every day. Why should I participate in your land auction? But unfortunately, the mining areas you occupy are illegal, and your gold is also illegally obtained. It will be confiscated sooner or later. Knowing that Vanderbilt Staten Mining Company can bring Vanderbilt at least tens of thousands of dollars in income every day, Buckhouse was jealous. Not necessarily. We have legal procedures. I have to remind you, Buckhouse, California is not a territorial area now. There is a legal government there. The resolution of Congress to confiscate California land is unconstitutional. Vanderbilt's confidence comes from his confidence in Liang Zhao. He has always been very accurate in judging people. He believes that he has not made a mistake in judging people, and Liang Zhao will never give in easily. Parts of the proposals in this year's compromise bill are also unconstitutional, so what will the result be? Backhouse retorted. I think you will be disappointed soon. Californians will not compromise. After saying this, Vanderbilt did not want to continue arguing with Backhouse. In front of gold, not only Liang Zhao and he would not compromise, he believed that the thousands of gold diggers and miners in California would not compromise either. Chapter 110, America Full of Contradictions. The reward accumulates to 10,000 points and more chapters will be added. There is a newspaper clipping on Henry's desk. The clippings are all articles that Liang Zhao published in the California Daily. Next to the clippings are all the letters he has exchanged with Liang Zhao since he arrived in Washington. Henry pondered for a long time, picked up his pen and wrote an article titled, Who is Destroying Our American Dream? After writing this article, Henry felt unsatisfied, and wrote 2 more articles in a row. State rights cannot be trampled and California's gold belongs to all American citizens. Henry didn't call his assistant until he couldn't write any more. Publish these 3 articles in the Washington Post, the Washington Republic, and the New York Evening Post, and notify them that in the next week, the 3 newspapers will no longer accept any advertisements and gossip, only articles about California. In addition, all newspapers published by these 3 newspapers in the next week will be given away for free. But sir, if we don't accept advertisements and publish for free, it will be our loss. The assistant hesitated. Compared to the pressure Mr. Liang will have to bear in the future, our loss is nothing. Henry waved his hand to signal his assistant to leave. He is no longer the president of a small local newspaper, but the president of 3 first-class newspapers, the Washington Post, the Washington Republic, and the New York Evening Post. Although these 3 newspapers are not the top newspapers in Washington and New York, they are also first-class local newspapers with considerable influence. Becoming the president of 3 first-class newspapers is something Henry, who used to be the president of a small newspaper in San Francisco, never dreamed of. He cherished this opportunity very much. Henry originally offered Liang Zhao $100,000 to buy a newspaper, but after arriving in the East, he found that the offer he gave Liang Zhao was still too high. Due to the economic downturn, many newspapers had to lay off employees, and fewer people were willing to place advertisements and publish articles in newspapers. Henry easily bought 3 first-class newspapers with a solid foundation with only $230,000. When Henry was in California, he learned from Liang Zhao how to incite the emotions of the people. He believed that this approach would also be effective in Washington, D.C. and New York, where there were many gold diggers going to California to pan for gold. As long as he could incite their emotions in the newspapers, he believed that the families of these people and the people who planned to go to California to pan for gold would definitely take to the streets to protest against the resolution of Congress. Those gold diggers carried not only their personal dreams of getting rich, but also the hopes of poor families. Vanderbilt and his friends were not idle either, and they did not want their investments in California to go down the drain. Their ideas coincided with Henry's, and they also put pressure on the government and Congress by planning protest marches. The only difference was that Henry planned the marches with his pen and newspapers, while Vanderbilt and others planned the marches with dollars. What surprised them was that Liang Zhao and Robinson, the two representatives of California, had a very good reputation among these grassroots people. Dr. Robert, vice president of the New York Medical Association, and some doctors from the New York Medical Association petitioned Congress to revote the already passed bill. Robert even made a statement in the newspaper that without California's successful experience in preventing and controlling cholera, New York State and other surrounding states would never be able to defeat cholera. The cheap nutrient solution and reference drug formula selflessly provided by Liang Zhao and Robinson saved countless poor people's lives and enabled thousands of cholera patients to survive cholera. Robert kept his word and did not just talk. After issuing a statement, Robert refused to see the dignitaries in New York who supported the bill. Under Robert's influence, more than half of the doctors in the New York Medical Association also refused to see patients to show their support for California. Soon, protests and demonstrations spread from Washington, D.C. and New York to surrounding states. Some of the lower and middle-class people did so out of selfish interests, some to join in the fun, and some out of gratitude. They took to the streets to protest with different attitudes and ideas, and some people even held up abstract portraits of Liang Zhao and Robinson and wrote American heroes on the portraits. Positive images naturally require negative images to set off the brilliance and majesty of the positive images. Congressman Calhoun, who proposed the bill, and those fat nobles and tycoons in New York became the villains who were condemned by thousands of people without any suspense. Calhoun's portrait was even covered with insulting words such as old thief and corrupt congressman. The walls of Calhoun's estates in Washington and New York on the Hudson River were either covered with the graffiti or splashed with feces. This move made Calhoun, who was seriously ill, restless, and he fainted several times. The bright image he had painstakingly created was gone, and now he was seen by the public as an image of a man who had lost his integrity in his later years. Henry saw this and immediately wrote the article The Hero and the Old Thief. Fremont was very leisurely. He went to the British Embassy and the French Embassy to drink coffee several times and was interviewed by some reporters at the door of the embassy. He then left Washington and returned to California. Some passionate extremists said they would take up arms and follow Congressman Fremont to California to defend California's land from being trampled by Congress and the federal government together with the people of California. Texas Governor Bell was overjoyed when he learned about this. He ignored the government's order to withdraw Texas from the New Mexico region. Instead of withdrawing his troops, he continued to send more troops to New Mexico in an attempt to take back the land that originally belonged to Texas. Texas originally gave up independence and joined the United States, believing that joining the big family of the United States would be more conducive to the development of Texas and gain more benefits. However, since joining the United States, Texas has not gained much benefit, but has been repeatedly asked to cede territory to the territories for the establishment of new states. This made the top leaders of Texas deeply dissatisfied with the United States. Bell's increase in troops made the territorial conflict between Texas and New Mexico, which had been easing, suddenly tense. Officials and garrisons in New Mexico sent urgent telegrams to Washington, requesting additional troops for assistance. In just 1 month, the stable and improving situation in the United States after the compromise agreement disappeared, and the fragile side of the United States was exposed again. The people in the states were not united, the economy was in decline, and the sharp class contradictions were like 3 balls of fire that roasted Fillmore and his new cabinet. Fillmore urged Congress to revote on the proposal to confiscate the land granted by the Mexican government in California. He hoped to get 1/3 of the Senate's votes against the proposal, thus rejecting it. Unfortunately, although the number of votes against the proposal increased, it still did not reach 1/3. Calhoun, the old man who is now criticized by thousands of people, was actually in good health and was able to give a half-hour speech in Congress. Under Calhoun's instigation, Congress instead put pressure on Fillmore and openly demanded that troops be sent to California to ensure that the land in California could be successfully recovered. Crazy. Crazy. They are all a bunch of fucking lunatics. Fillmore was so angry at the actions of Congress that he spoke without thinking. Mr. President, will you send troops to California in accordance with a request of Congress? Secretary of War Conrad asked Fillmore. Conrad, please pay attention to your words. What do you mean by sending troops? California is now a state of the United States. Not an enemy of the United States, Fillmore felt a little stuffy in his chest, and he said while holding his chest, "It's just that this bill has been passed by both the Senate and the House of Representatives with a high vote. If we don't respond," Conrad said stutteringly, "then do as they say. Tell them that they will bear the consequences of any consequences." Fillmore sat down and drank a sip of water, and continued to ask, "Which unit is closest to California besides the California Infantry Regiment?" "Colonel Mason's Infantry Regiment, but Colonel Mason is stationed on the border between the United States and Mexico. I'm worried that if something really happens in California, the Mexican government will take advantage of it," Conrad said uneasily. Well, it added fuel to the fire. As California has just been incorporated into the United States rule over California cannot be said to be weak, but completely absent. Fillmore tried his best to promote the establishment of California in the hope that California can be integrated into the United States of America as soon as possible to consolidate the United States rule over the local area. Fillmore is now very worried that if the powerful gentry in California are pushed to a corner, they will directly leave the United States and return to the embrace of Mexico, just like they left Mexico in the past. By then, America would have no way to express its suffering, and Fillmore would also become a sinner of America. Notify Colonel Mason to dispatch half a regiment of troops to California to assist Liang Zhao in guarding against the Indians. Tell him that he is not allowed to clash with the local armed forces unless it is absolutely necessary. Otherwise, he will become the sinner who provokes the American Civil War. Fillmore took out a piece of letter paper and prepared to write a letter to the California authorities, hoping to stabilize the dignitaries in California first. He needs enough time to deal with Congress, provided that both sides should exercise restraint during this period. What about Texas? Texas did not withdraw its armed forces from the New Mexico region as required, but continued to increase its troops. This is the telegram that has just been sent. Conrad trembled as he handed Fillmore today's telegram. The most worried thing has happened. Fillmore felt very headache. He now even suspected that the real cause of death of his predecessor, President Taylor, was not cholera, but was exhausted and angry to death. Chapter 111 Adequate Preparation. It was mid-November 1850 when Fremont arrived in California. The winter in California was cold and damp, and it had been raining continuously for 5 days. The ship slowly sailed into the busy port of San Francisco, and Fremont walked off the ship holding an umbrella. Behind him followed more than 20 servants he brought from Georgia and more than 40 fanatical followers from New York. Liang Zhao welcomed Fremont at the heavily guarded port of San Francisco. When the local people heard the news of Fremont's return, they spontaneously went to the port to welcome Fremont's return and gave Fremont a heroic courtesy. This made Fremont feel that all his efforts in Washington, D.C. were worth it, although the results were somewhat unsatisfactory. "Welcome home, my good comrade," Liang Zhao said, holding Fremont's calloused hands. "Home, yes, California is our home, and we will not allow anyone to trample on and destroy our home." Fremont smiled with relief. Fremont was very surprised to find that San Francisco had undergone earth-shaking changes during his absence. The new city of San Francisco, centered on the commercial street, is planned in an orderly manner, with brand new buildings rising from the planned land. There are even several factories on the edge of the city, and the chimney of one of the factories is emitting thick smoke. "There are factories in California now?" Fremont asked in surprise. Fremont is from Georgia in the South, but he is not a plantation owner who stubbornly pursues a poetic and idyllic life. He believes that developing industry is the way out for the future of America. Therefore, after the outbreak of the Civil War, Fremont did not choose to be loyal to the Southern Alliance, but insisted on his beliefs, betrayed his family and chose to serve the North. "Yes, there are, but at present only the steam engine manufacturing plant and the shipyard are operating normally. The other factories lack workers and raw materials. They are just settled in the industrial zone first and have not started work yet," Liang Zhao said. "Now we have more important things to do, and the factory matters can only be delayed for a while." Strauss directly acquired some small and medium-sized industrial and mining enterprises in the eastern region, dismantled the machines of these enterprises, and transported them to California at the fastest speed via the Nicaragua route. Along with these machines, 1,200 skilled workers and engineers arrived in California. Liang Zhao almost transplanted these mature industrial and mining enterprises in the east to California. However, Congress insisted on taking back the land in California. In order to protect his legal land, Liang Zhao could only temporarily slow down the pace of industrial development. If those consortiums were not too greedy, with your ability, these factories in California would have started long ago, Fremont sighed. He looked around and saw that the port was full of fully armed personnel. Jinshan Bay even built a fixed coastal defense artillery turret to block the entire Jinshan Bay. The armed personnel who were on alert were inspecting the ships preparing to enter the port and strictly questioning the captains on board. Even the British and French merchant ships were no exception. Fremont understood that Liang Zhao used his main resources and energy to defend the port of San Francisco. It's meaningless to say this. I want to let those guys in Congress know that Californians are not easy to mess with. Liang Zhao ordered someone to pull a carriage and said to Fremont, "Fremont, get in the car." Fremont didn't want to ride in the carriage, but asked Liang Zhao, "Are there any horses? I'm more used to riding horses, of course." Liang Zhao clapped his hands, and Connie quickly led two majestic horses over. The two rode their horses all the way back to Tingtao Garden. The guard on duty at the post at the gate of Tingtao Garden saw that it was Liang Zhao who returned, and saluted Liang Zhao and Fremont with a very strange but pleasing military salute. This military salute looked like a Prussian military salute. Did Liang Zhao recruit Prussian officers to train his army? Fremont was full of doubts. Along the way, he noticed Liang Zhao's soldiers. These soldiers were well trained and did not look like guerrillas. They even walked side by side. Before arriving in California, Fremont did not have much hope for the California Infantry Regiment formed by Liang Zhao. Liang Zhao is good at business and is proficient in civil affairs, but he is not a professional military personnel after all. Fremont has low expectations for the California Infantry Regiment. As long as it meets the standards of militia, he will be satisfied. Now it seems that Liang Zhao is not an amateur in military affairs. Although Fremont does not know the actual combat effectiveness of the California Infantry Regiment, on the surface, the spirit and organization of the California Infantry Regiment have surpassed many active infantry regiments in the United States. Fremont is now more confident in defending California. These soldiers are well trained by you, Liang Zhao. You always surprise me. How many soldiers do you have like this? Fremont asked. The California Infantry Regiment now has 350 veterans. In addition to these veterans, 700 new recruits have been recruited in the past 2 months. They are training in the fortress. Liang Zhao replied that the armed forces he can mobilize now are not only the California Infantry Regiment, but also members of the Loyalty Society, the mining teams of major gold mining companies, local farmers, etc. These are all armed forces that can be organized and mobilized. When necessary, Liang Zhao can raise an armed force of 2,000 to 3,000 people, or even more. His current family background is much richer than when Washington founded the country. Enough. Fremont rubbed his hands excitedly. I heard that Colonel Mason's half regiment is marching towards San Francisco. I don't think half a regiment of troops will get any advantage in San Francisco. Texas has also recently sent troops to New Mexico, and the federal government cannot dispatch too many troops to California in the short term. Even if a lot of troops are dispatched to California, I am not afraid, Liang Zhao said very confidently. He was not blindly confident. California's infrastructure was very poor. Not only did it not have railways, but there were also few roads. It was also far away from the eastern base camp. Even if the federal government had the ability to transfer 5 or even 10 infantry regiments, it would not be able to provide logistical support for these expeditionary infantry regiments. The federal government wanted to transport a large amount of military logistics to California only through the Nicaragua route or the Panama route. The eastern section of the Nicaragua route was controlled by Vanderbilt, and the western section was controlled by his global shipping company. The only transportation route that the federal government has full control of is Panama, and now Panama not only has no canal, but also has not started to build a railway. If the federal government wants to provide supplies to the army through this route, it will not only take longer, but the transportation efficiency will also be very low. Mason's troops have not even reached Los Angeles yet, which is already very telling. It seems that you have made all the preparations. After entering Tingtao Garden, Fremont put away his umbrella and shook off the rain on his tweed coat. Connie handed Fremont a clean coat with great insight. Fremont thanked Connie and then changed into the coat Connie handed him. It can't be said to be complete, but I have made all the preparations. This autumn harvest, California harvested a lot of food, plus the food I bought from Mexico, The food I stockpiled is enough for us to support us until next autumn harvest, Liang Zhao said as he walked. When necessary, we can implement a rationing system for California's supplies so that these supplies can be distributed more effectively. In this way, even if new immigrants continue to pour into California, at the current rate of immigration growth, we can guarantee that we can barely hold on until next fall, don't say next fall. With the current situation of the federal government, I don't think they can hold on for half a year. Fremont followed Liang Zhao's steps closely and said, Mr. President supports us. What America needs now is to recuperate and heal the wounds caused by the war, rather than launching a new war. I think Mr. President and those wise congressmen should know this. As long as we can hold on for a while, those diehards in Congress will sooner or later lower their proud heads. Liang Zhao also agreed with Fremont's point of view. America is indeed not ready for another new war. At the beginning of the year, the North and the free states and the southern slave states were so fierce, but in the end, didn't the two sides still not fight? This is not because the North and the South love peace, but because neither the North nor the South is ready for a civil war. In terms of contradictions, the contradictions between the North and the South in America are far greater than those between the East and the West. Liang Zhao seemed to be an enemy of the entire United States, but in fact his enemies were only the nobles of the old states and the representatives of the financial tycoons in Congress. As long as Fillmore was not extremely stupid, he would not keep paying for the greed of these people. Chapter 112 Telegram. In the telegraph room of Tingtao Garden, the ticking sound of telegrams was heard. The telegraph operator that Liang Zhao had recruited from the first telegraph office in the East was skillfully operating the electromagnetic telegraph machine and sending the first telegram to the American Telegraph Office branch in the Sacramento area. After the telegram was sent, the operator nervously waited for the reply from the other side. Soon after, a sound came from the telegraph machine. The Sacramento branch successfully received their telegram and replied to them. The operator hurriedly decrypted the message, then stood up and handed the decrypted and translated message to Liang Zhao. Sir, long live California, this was the first time that electricity was connected between San Francisco and Sacramento. Long live California. In the telegraph room, the California dignitaries who were eagerly waiting for the first intercity telegram in California couldn't help but shout out this message. Their faces were filled with happy and confident smiles. At this time, 6 years had passed since Samuel Morse, the father of the telegraph, sent the first telegram from Congress to Baltimore in 1844. What a miracle God has created. In just less than 6 years, the length of telegraph lines laid in the United States has exceeded 14,000 miles, and there are 20 telegraph offices. However, due to the high cost of laying telegraph lines, the average cost of laying telegraph lines per mile is as high as $500. If the telegraph lines have to cross mountains and rivers, the cost of laying will be even higher. Therefore, most of these telegraph lines and telegraph offices are concentrated in the eastern region with developed economy and strong financial resources. In order to lay the telegraph line between San Francisco and Sacramento, Liang Zhao spent a full $65,000. Including the telegraph lines laid to military fortresses, Liang Zhao's spending on laying telegraph lines has exceeded $70,000. After the storm is over, he will also lay a telegraph line between San Francisco and Los Angeles. With a telegraph, Liang Zhao could issue orders to the military fortress in his own manner, and at the same time receive information from the Sacramento area in the fastest time. The legendary wind-hearing ears are just like this. The impact of the telegraph on Deng Yan was greater than that of the steamship. When he was in Guangdong, Deng Yan could at least see the British steamships, so Deng Yan was not very unfamiliar with steamships, but it was the first time he saw the new thing called the telegraph. He thought that this machine that could immediately receive information from hundreds of miles away was very magical. If there is such a thing, can't we plan and strategize in the telegraph room, command thousands of troops, and win thousands of miles away? Deng Yan's first reaction was to apply the telegraph to the military, which may be related to his military background. That depends on the person, and it may also bury millions of troops in the telegraph room. With that, Liang Zhao left the telegraph room and walked back to the study. He glanced at the calendar hanging on the wall and asked Deng Yan. Brothers Wen Yao and Wen Shun haven't returned from Los Angeles yet. Shortly after the establishment of the Loyalty Society, Deng Wen Yao and Deng Wen Shun were sent to Los Angeles by him to run Los Angeles. Now Colonel Mason is leading half of the regiment to the north. And he must pass through Los Angeles. For safety reasons, Liang Zhao had already sent someone to inform Deng Wenyao and Deng Wenshun last month to take the local residents, especially the Chinese residents, to San Francisco to avoid war. The military discipline of American soldiers in this era was worse than that of later generations, especially Colonel Mason had a captain named William Tycoon Sherman under his command. This man was the notorious general in the North during the Civil War. The Germans liked to name their tanks and armored vehicles after animals, especially cats, while the Americans liked to name their tanks and armored vehicles after their leaders. Sherman also won this honor. The M4 tank known as the Ronson Lighter during World War II was named after him. This man was extremely murderous. During the Civil War, he carried out an indiscriminate massacre in Atlanta and burned down the southern city. Sherman killed everyone wherever he went. His atrocities were not limited to Atlanta. As long as he passed by, no matter it was a military fortress or a civilian settlement, he could not escape his murderous hands. In Mississippi, the hometown of Confederate President Davis, more than 90% of the towns and plantations were burned down by Sherman, and more than half of the young and middle-aged people died under Sherman's butcher knife. Sherman's massacre made Mississippi a famous poor state in the United States after the war, and it took a whole century to recover. Sherman's bloodthirsty nature had already begun to show signs during the Mexican-American War. Sartre told Liang Zhao that during the Mexican-American War, because the Mexican army retreated too quickly, Sherman could not catch up with the Mexican army. In a rage, Sherman let his soldiers massacre Mexican villages to vent his anger, and burned the villages afterwards to destroy the evidence. Liang Zhao's base camp was in San Francisco and Sacramento, and he could not send troops to garrison Los Angeles. Moreover, he had not yet developed the oil in the Los Angeles area, and there was no high-value industry in Los Angeles that was worth his troops to garrison. But for the safety of local residents, Liang Zhao decided to send local residents, especially Chinese residents, back to San Francisco for resettlement. Anyway, there are not many residents in Los Angeles. Even if they all come to San Francisco, Liang Zhao has the ability to resettle more than 1,000 residents in Los Angeles. When Zhao just brought more than 500 Los Angeles residents to Jinshan this morning, Deng Yan said. Wenshun hasn't come back yet. Liang Zhao couldn't help but frown when he heard this. Wenshun is a stubborn kid. He said he is the mayor of Los Angeles and is responsible for the people of Los Angeles. He insisted on staying to persuade the people in Los Angeles who don't want to come to Jinshan to come to Jinshan. Deng Yan was full of worries about this. He was very worried about Deng Wenshun's safety. Have all the Chinese residents returned with Wenyao? Liang Zhao continued to ask. Except Wenshun and a dozen members of the Loyalty Society, all the Chinese residents have returned. Those who are unwilling to leave Los Angeles are basically local white people, Deng Yan said. This troublesome guy, Liang Zhao sighed, send someone to send a letter to Wenshun immediately, telling him that he has fulfilled his responsibilities. If the white people who refuse to listen to advice and leave are left to fend for themselves in Los Angeles, Mason's subordinates are not easy to deal with. Don't let yourself get killed in Los Angeles. After the War Department and the Army Department appointed Liang Zhao as the Sheriff of California and the head of the infantry regiment, they actually handed over the defense task of the Canada-Mexico border to Liang Zhao. Mason shifted the focus of defense to the southwest of New Mexico. But soon, Mason received 4 letters from the President, Congress, the War Department, and the Army Department, which could also be said to be orders. They asked Mason to immediately send half a regiment to San Francisco and Sacramento to ensure that Congress could successfully recover the land in California. Faced with these 4 letters with different wordings, Mason felt very confused. The President and the War Department asked Mason to treat the local gentry's armed forces with a relatively gentle attitude and forbade him to conflict with the local armed forces, otherwise he would be responsible for provoking the American Civil War. This made Mason want to cry, but he had no tears. He was just a small colonel. How could he take the responsibility of provoking a civil war? Besides, it was your Congress, not Mason, who had conflicts with the California authorities. Congress and the Army Department required Mason to treat local gentry and armed forces with a very tough attitude, and clearly instructed him to use all means to eliminate local gentry and merchants who opposed Congress. After reading the 4 letters, Mason felt as if 10,000 alpacas were running through his heart, and for a moment he didn't know what to do. However, at least one thing was consistent in the 4 letters, that is, they all ordered him to go to San Francisco and Sacramento. As for what to do after arriving in San Francisco and Sacramento, Mason could only take it one step at a time. Perhaps he would receive new orders after arriving there. Chapter 113 Los Angeles Massacre. Extra chapter for Master Yimin Wima. Not long after Colonel Mason set out, he met an envoy sent by Liang Zhao. The envoy brought Liang Zhao's letter, the land deed signed by Colonel Mason himself, 3 bills of exchange for $10,000, and 2,000 ounces of gold, and persuaded Mason with emotion and gold. Problems that can be solved with money are not problems for Liang Zhao, but problems that cannot be solved with money are more troublesome. Liang Zhao used courtesy before force. Although he was on guard against Mason, he had no grudges against Mason and did not want to fight with Mason. Liang Zhao made it clear in the letter that Mason was a very good commander of the U.S. Army. His duty was to defend the territory and people of the United States, not to degenerate into free thug and consumables for the jebel. It was a pity that Colonel Mason still declined Liang Zhao's kindness and declined Liang Zhao's dollars and gold in the eager eyes of officers and soldiers. This is not because Mason is not greedy for money. Mason had also accepted gold from Sartre's early immigrants. It's just that this time Mason has a mission. He is a man of principles and pursuits. He can't accept Liang Zhao's gold at this time to give people a handle. The envoy was not disappointed. He just needed to show these dollars and gold in front of Mason's officers and soldiers, and the purpose of this trip would be achieved. Maybe Colonel Mason doesn't love money, but can he guarantee that his officers and soldiers will not be tempted by gold? Obviously, they can't. These guys who only earn $8 or $10 a month can't resist such temptation. Those officers and soldiers watched the envoy take the gold back unwillingly, and there were many brave officers who plucked up the courage to persuade Colonel Mason. Sir, this is Colonel Liang's good intention. Besides, Congress has not approved the military funds for this operation. Since we are going to San Francisco and Sacramento to help them exterminate the Indians, I think it is understandable to accept Colonel Liang's good intention. A second lieutenant looked at the gold being taken away by the messenger eagerly, and couldn't help swallowing his saliva. The second lieutenant was greeted by Mason's cold eyes. The second lieutenant immediately closed his mouth and lowered his head. The other officers also looked like they wanted to say something but stopped, and they were very tempted by the US dollars and gold that were delivered to their doorsteps. After a short stop, Colonel Mason ordered to continue the march. When they were still 20 miles away from Los Angeles, half of Colonel Mason's regiment was exhausted, and Colonel Mason himself was exhausted after days of marching. He felt that it was time for these tired soldiers to stop and rest before setting off again. There was no special logistics unit to provide him with supplies for this operation. Except for a few major settlements, the southern part of California was sparsely populated. Even the Indians who were easily encountered here 4 or 5 years ago were hard to hide. According to the predetermined plan, Mason would purchase supplies in Los Angeles and requisition local ships to sail to San Francisco. In order to save time and not delay the journey, Mason decided to send a young man who was capable and still had plenty of physical strength to lead a scout to Los Angeles to carry out this mission. Captain William Tycoon Sherman took the initiative to volunteer and expressed his willingness to carry out this mission with his first company. Colonel Mason smiled and nodded at Sherman with a very approving look. Sherman was indeed a capable general under his command. He graduated from the West Point Military Academy with the 6th best score in the same period and made great contributions in the Mexican-American War and was promoted to captain. Except for some impulsiveness and violent tendencies, this outstanding young man was almost perfect. Among all the officers under his command, Mason believed that the young man named Sherman had the most promising future, and he was very optimistic about this young man. Sherman, you take the first company to Los Angeles first. Be sure to requisition some local ships. This is very important. Colonel Mason ordered the quartermaster to bring a small bag of gold coins and a large bag of Spanish and Mexican silver coins to Sherman. Sherman, you must control your temper and don't conflict with the local residents. Do you understand? After handing the gold and silver coins to Sherman, Colonel Mason repeatedly warned him, hoping that Sherman would remember his words. Yes, Colonel. Sherman saluted Colonel Mason and led the first company away from the exhausted large team and headed west to Los Angeles. Sherman's first company was the most elite company among the 10 companies under Colonel Mason. The physical fitness of the soldiers in the first company was generally better than that of the soldiers in other companies. More importantly, the first company was also the only cavalry company under Colonel Mason. This cavalry company was established by Mason at a huge cost after the war. Sherman rode his horse and soon arrived in Los Angeles. At this time, more than half of the residents of Los Angeles had left, and only more than 700 residents were unwilling to leave their hometown for San Francisco and remained in Los Angeles. The bill passed by Congress was to accept the land donated by the Mexican government in the California region, which naturally included Los Angeles. The residents of Los Angeles had learned about this news in the California Daily, and they were not friendly to the American soldiers entering the town. The residents of Los Angeles were even more unwilling to cooperate with Sherman's procurement of food and grass. In addition to their unwillingness to sell food to Sherman, there was another more important reason that Sherman's purchase price was too low. In the past, when the mayor bought food from them on behalf of Colonel Liang, Colonel Liang's bid was more than 7 times that of Sherman, and Colonel Liang's people always paid directly in gold, and they spoke both nicely and kindly. Unlike these rude people, not only were they arrogant, but they even wanted to buy their food with silver coins. In California, where gold was flooding, no one was willing to accept worthless silver coins. A bunch of guys who don't want to be punished. We are American soldiers. Is this how you treat American soldiers? The land under your feet was won by our brave soldiers with their lives and blood. Sherman, who was furious, fired a gun into the air in the square of Los Angeles town and ordered the purchase of food and fodder from house to house. After receiving Sherman's order, Sherman's soldiers rushed into the homes of Los Angeles residents like wolves and tigers, forcibly collecting their food and fodder. Captain, this is peacetime. You have no right to forcibly collect our supplies, and the residents of this town have no obligation to cooperate with your actions. After hearing the news, Deng Wenxian, the mayor of Los Angeles town, rushed to the square in the center of Los Angeles town with a dozen members of the Loyalty Society and 50 or 60 armed civilians with live ammunition. Look! What are you doing? You guys dare to brandish swords and guns in front of us? Don't you see who we are? We are American soldiers. The regular army of the United States. Put away those toys in your hands. Otherwise, I will not be polite, Sherman threatened, waving the 6-shot revolver in his hand. Sherman's face reminded Deng Wenxian of the Qing dynasty's officials and soldiers. After following Liang Zhao for so long, Deng Wenxian knew that only with guns in hand could one be strong, so he naturally refused to put down his weapons. The Los Angeles residents behind Deng Wenxian were also unwilling to put down their weapons, and the two sides just stood there with guns. At this moment, gunshots suddenly rang out in the town, followed by the screams of a woman with a Mexican accent. Oh my God! They shot and killed people. Oh my God! They shot and killed people. Soon, the men in Los Angeles picked up their guns and drove those annoying soldiers out of their homes. Even women and children picked up brooms, rakes, stones and even cow and horse feces to greet these soldiers. For a time, the sound of gunfire rang out in Los Angeles. Deng Wenxian and Sherman looked at each other. In a flash, the two of them had no time to think about it and pulled the trigger instinctively. Thank you Huajia for the 222 reward, Yiluagajin for the 1200 reward, Piaba Zifang for the 100 reward, and Yiquidong Grenjian for the 100 reward. Chapter 114, Remarks on the Release. This book was released at noon today. Thanks to everyone for your support along the way. This book has finally made it to the 6th channel. To be honest, this book is a flop, but this was expected before I started writing. The History channel is not a niche channel, but the subject of foreign history is a niche among niches. Gideon Library is so huge, but there are only 4 surviving fine foreign history books. It can be seen that the audience of this type of subject is very limited. I originally planned to write a book with the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom as the background, but after talking with the editor, I felt that there were too many restrictions, so I had to give up. I wrote this book completely on a whim. I watched a bunch of American documentaries out of boredom and became interested. After that, I bought some relatively boring books to get a general understanding of the United States during this period. In addition, I liked the novels of Mark Twain and O. Henry when I was a student, so I started typing. Although I know that fast-paced and stimulating articles can make money faster, I still want to write something I want to write on Gideon. Writing this kind of subject matter is not only thankless, but also very dangerous. It is like sliding on the edge of 404. If you are not careful, you will be blocked. However, I believe that everyone has their own preferences. Some people like fast food and some like Haiyan Shengyan. There will always be people who read it. Everyone, please watch it and cherish it. I will not be pitiful. It is not easy for everyone under the epidemic. I hope all friends can find their own golden reality and live a happy life. The minimum update of 10,000 words on the day of listing will be guaranteed. Try to ensure more updates. Part-time work time is limited. I hope everyone can understand. If there is an additional update, it is limited to 500 average subscriptions. For every additional 50 average subscriptions, one more update will be added. The monthly ticket is now $269, and one more update will be added when it reaches 300. After 300, one more update will be added for every 50 monthly tickets. One more update will be added for more than 400 daily recommendation tickets. Thank you all, thank my editor Liang Zhao, and thank King Shintishan for the chapter push. Finally, I ask everyone to subscribe. Thank you all. Chapter 115. The war begins. After the gunshot, Deng Wenchen felt someone throw a stone at his shoulder, and the warm liquid splashing on his face made him realize that he was shot. He didn't have time to think about it. He fired while leading the loyalists who were fighting back and the surrounding Los Angeles residents to retreat into the church behind him. As soon as the first round of firefights in the square ended, more than 20 people were lying in the square. These people who fell down included not only local residents in plain clothes, but also soldiers in gray coats. In this battle of strength, the soldiers with advanced weapons and good training had the upper hand without exception, and their casualties were far less than those of civilians. Kill them all. After the adrenaline faded, a burning stinging sensation spread from Sherman's left arm to his whole body. He roared like a mad dog at the door of the church. The dead companions in the square also made these soldiers lose their minds. Without the restraint of Colonel Mason, they obeyed Sherman's orders. Under Sherman's orders, they skillfully completed the loading and then pulled the trigger ruthlessly at the church. As the second round of gunfire rang out, several civilians who had not yet entered the church fell in a pool of blood. Inside the church, Deng Wenchen and local residents fired revenge bullets at the soldiers in the square through the doors and windows. Soldiers who heard the gunfire rushed to the church under the command of the sergeant. The dense rain of bullets they fired soon suppressed the Los Angeles residents in the church and made them unable to raise their heads. Deng Wenchen, leaning against a corner of the wall, looked around the church. What came into view were the unrecognizable doors and windows, broken glass, bullet holes all over the wall, and the wounded who fell to the ground and wailed. "You guys, I'll cover you out, and burn the granary and hay barn immediately. Don't leave a grain of food or a handful of hay for these damn beasts." Deng Wenchen knew that he couldn't defend the church with his current armed forces, and he pointed to several members of the Loyalty Society and said, "Little Dragon Head, leave this to us brothers. We will burn it thoroughly. Not a grain of rice. Not a blade of grass. Not a single blade of grass left for the foreigners." The chief minister with a golden black bear badge on his chest patted his chest and assured Deng Wenchen, "Go. The foreigners haven't blocked the back door of the church yet. Go out through the back door." Deng Wenchen pushed the chief minister away and told him to leave quickly. Sherman and his soldiers poured all their anger on the small church in the center of Los Angeles. For these veterans with actual combat experience, it was not difficult to attack a small church guarded by civilian armed forces. Although Deng Wenchen fought bravely, he was outnumbered and the church was soon lost. Deng Wenchen, who was seriously injured, became Sherman's prisoner. At this time, the granary and hay barn in Los Angeles town caught fire. "Not good, Captain. The fire is in the barn and hay barn," the quartermaster, who had just learned the location of the barn and hay barn, exclaimed. Looking at the flames rising to the sky not far away, Deng Wenchen, who was covered in blood, showed a mocking smile and shouted, "Ghosts? Don't you want food and fodder? Go grab them from the fire." "Shut up. Believe it or not, I will shoot you." Sherman threatened Deng Wenchen with his revolver against his forehead. Deng Wenchen closed his eyes and waited for Sherman to shoot. He was not afraid of death. The second lieutenant on the side hurriedly persuaded Sherman, "Captain, please calm down. He is the mayor of Los Angeles." Looking at the burning granaries and barns, Sherman's breathing became more and more rapid. In any case, he must complete the task assigned to him by Colonel Mason. Killing one civilian is killing, and killing 10,000 civilians is also killing. There is no essential difference. These guys must have surplus food and fodder at home. Take your guns and go to their homes to collect them. Those who are unwilling to hand over food and fodder, you know what to do." Sherman put down his gun and said coldly, "Understood. Captain, you will be punished for delaying military opportunities." These soldiers were all experienced soldiers who had followed Sherman into Mexico and marched to the city of Mexico. They certainly knew what to do. As soon as Sherman gave this order, the situation in Los Angeles was completely out of control, and the sound of gunfire resounded through the sky. This once quiet town has become a hell on earth. By the time Colonel Mason arrived in Los Angeles, it was too late. The buildings in the town of Los Angeles had already been destroyed beyond recognition by the soldiers of the First Company. Rather than saying that they were soldiers, these guys were bandits, or even worse than bandits. After all, bandits have to consider sustainability and exhaust their resources, so they won't do things so thoroughly. The sky above the town was shrouded in billowing smoke, and the fire was reveling in the wooden houses that had not been completely burned out. It was obviously a cold winter, but Mason, who walked into Los Angeles, felt that it was even hotter than the scorching summer. Even the choking air was filled with a disgusting smell, which was the smell of roasted and burnt meat. The unrecognizable bodies were scattered in the charred buildings and streets, which made Mason unable to bear to look directly. "Colonel, I have completed the task you assigned to me." Sherman, with a bandage on his left hand, stood in front of Mason like a child who had made a big mistake, and reported to Colonel Mason in a stuttering manner. His eyes were empty and lifeless. His expression was numb. Next to Sherman were several carriages full of food and fodder, and the bloodstains on them were still clearly visible. Sherman had thought about destroying the bodies and completely erasing the traces of the existence of this town. However, Sherman, who had sobered up, finally gave up these unrealistic fantasies. Some residents of Los Angeles had already fled Los Angeles, and soon, everything that happened here would be spread to San Francisco. As for erasing the traces of the existence of this town, it was even more wishful thinking. Although Los Angeles was small, it was also the third largest settlement in California after San Francisco and Sacramento. Sherman chose to accept all this without any guilt. As for the nervousness and fear he showed in front of Colonel Mason, it was not out of guilt. It was out of fear of authority and the military court. Sherman, what have you done? They are all American citizens. Not Indians. Not Mexicans." Colonel Mason's voice trembled with anger. He wanted to take out his pistol and shoot the subordinate who had caused such a disaster. But Mason still maintained a trace of rationality after all. He just waved his whip and whipped Sherman hard to vent his anger. "This time I will personally send you to the military court." Colonel Mason put away his whip and staggered towards the small port of Los Angeles town. The news of the tragedy in Los Angeles soon spread to San Francisco. Liang Zhao was very shocked when he learned of the news. He once suspected that there was something wrong with his hearing. Liang Zhao immediately informed Fremont and others of the news. After confirming that the news was true, Liang Zhao personally wrote the article to the California compatriots who died in Los Angeles and submitted it to the newspaper for publication. After the California Daily published the article to the California compatriots who died in Los Angeles, the entire California region was in an uproar. As Californians, the people in San Francisco and Sacramento were angry about the tragedy in Los Angeles. They could never have imagined that American soldiers would swing their butcher knives at American citizens. Today they cut the butcher knives on the heads of Los Angeles people, and tomorrow they will dare to put the butcher knives on the heads of their San Francisco and Sacramento people. Sherman's atrocities in Los Angeles further strengthened their determination to defend California. In the Los Angeles residents' resettlement area, these Los Angeles residents who came to San Francisco for refuge felt extremely sad and angry, and were also glad that they chose to come to San Francisco. Soon, a piece of news, whether true or false, reached Francisco. It was said that Mr. Deng Wenxian, the mayor of Los Angeles, led the people of Los Angeles to fight against these thugs and fought a fierce war with the thugs in the church in the center of the town. But in the end, they were outnumbered and the mayor himself died heroically. The people of Los Angeles petitioned Governor Robinson and Colonel Liang Zhao, the deputy governor and commander of the California Infantry Regiment, asking the governor and the commander to send troops to severely punish these thugs and seek justice for the dead Los Angeles people. The leaders of the major gold mining companies in the Sacramento area also spontaneously formed a volunteer group of more than 1,000 people, expressing their willingness to fight to the last drop of blood to defend the land and people of California. The people of San Francisco also took to the streets to petition the state government, saying that these thugs must be severely punished. Generous residents donated money and materials, and even directly asked to sign up to join the California Infantry Regiment. Everyone knew that what they had to defend now was not only the land and the property in California, but also their own lives and the lives of their families. The temporary office of the California government and the state assembly are temporarily set up near the square in the new city of San Francisco. Considering the long-term development in the future, the state government and the state assembly did not set the state capital in San Francisco, the largest city in California. Instead, Sacramento was chosen as the state capital because Sacramento is located in the hinterland of California, where there is still a lot of space waiting to be developed. Setting the state capital in Sacramento is more conducive to the development of the inland hinterland. However, the Capitol building, government office building and state court in the Sacramento area are still under construction. Therefore, the state government, the parliament and the court are still temporarily working in San Francisco, sharing office space with the city government, parliament and court of San Francisco. In the square of San Francisco, the stars and stripes have been lowered and torn to pieces by angry people. The sense of identity of Americans in this era is far less than that of later generations. What's more, California was only annexed by the United States 2 years ago, and it became a state of the United States in September this year, and it has only been 2 months. Moreover, in California, the American population does not have an absolute advantage. With the influx of gold diggers from China, Mexico and other parts of the world, the proportion of the population of Orthodox Americans is constantly shrinking. The state flag of California, or the flag of the Republic of California, is still flying over the San Francisco city square. It's just that the flag has been lowered a little to show the silence for the victims in Los Angeles. Compared with the flag of the United States of America, Californians now identify more with their state flag. When the Eastern Consortium first arrived in California, they relied on the support of Congress and the government to try to seize their land and gold. As the saying goes, cutting off someone's financial resources is like killing their parents. Now that the Los Angeles massacre has happened, the only remaining trust that Californians have in Washington and Congress has also disappeared. We love peace, but we are never afraid of war. In the state assembly, Liang Zhao, the president of the state senate, spoke first. If they mistake our love of peace for weakness, they are wrong. Those thugs must be held accountable for the tragedy in Los Angeles and pay the price for the deaths. California belongs to Californians. If Congress and the government still do not repent and continue to trample on California rights and the dignity of Californians, we will not hesitate to choose war and fight the tyrannical government to the end until the last Californian falls. Power and wealth are never obtained by charity, but by fighting for it. Congress and the government agreed to give Texas $10 million in compensation after ceding the land in Northwest Texas, not because they felt guilty about Texas. It was because the Texans were tough and did not hesitate to send troops to New Mexico to protest to Congress and the federal government. If the Texans were all cowards and dared not say a word, Texas would not even get $1,000 in compensation, let alone $10 million. Texans are not easy to bully, and Californians are not soft persimmons that can be manipulated by Congress and the federal government. Although California does not even have its own industry and its own weapons are relatively backward, this is not a reason to avoid war. If they choose to back down this time, the Congress and the federal government will dare to make more excessive demands on California next time. Historically, California set off a gold rush in 1848, but after the establishment of the state, the lives of Californians were worse than before the establishment of the state. One of the reasons is not that the Eastern tycoons regard California as their own backyard. The Eastern tycoons only care about the gold in California. They don't care about the development of California at all, let alone whether the people of California live in dire straits. It was not until the outbreak of the Civil War that the federal government was busy with the Civil War and had no time to look west. California slowly took back the rights and gold that originally belonged to California and slowly entered the normal development track. Start the war, start the war, start the war. After Liang Zhao finished his speech, a tsunami-like voice rang out in the parliament. The state legislators raised their arms and shouted, requesting to go to war. Californians are definitely not cowards. Punish the thugs severely. Fight the tyrannical federal government to the end. Long live the Republic of California. Not surprisingly, the state senate unanimously passed a vote to go to war with the federal government. Liang Zhao was amazed that these state legislators were even bolder than him. But on second thought, these people's original intention was not to go to war with the federal government. In fact, they were still trying to protect their property. After the Los Angeles tragedy, they also worried about their personal safety. Those thugs dared to kill in Los Angeles, which was not rich and had no gold. What would they do if they went to the wealthy San Francisco and Sacramento? It was creepy to think about it. The gang of Brandon, that Liang Zhao had just wiped out more than 2 months ago, was a military man. They posed a greater threat to the gold diggers in California than any other gangsters. The Californians had not forgotten the harm that Brandon had brought to them. Liang Zhao's goal was only to defend San Francisco and Sacramento, and he did not intend to fight outside the state. As long as these people were determined to fight, it was enough for him. He believed that as long as they fought within the state, these people and their private armed forces could be used by them. Californians are not only fighting for California now, but also for themselves. Colonel Mason's half regiment has already boarded a ship in Los Angeles and is heading north. They will arrive in San Francisco in 2 days. Liang Zhao had just walked out of the Parliament Hall when Elvis, who had been waiting at the door for a long time, hurriedly reported the latest situation to Liang Zhao. 4K chapters are here. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks to Shelly Villagers for the 100 rewards. Thanks to Zhu Hai Shu Shanlu for the 100 rewards. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 116, Welcoming the King's Army with Spears and Cannons. The title is wrong. It's Chapter 114. Sorry. The title cannot be modified. Robinson, who had just been elected governor of California for 2 months, felt very frustrated at this time. He wanted to show his strength and benefit the people of California after being elected governor. Unexpectedly, difficulties came one after another. The increasingly unscrupulous decisions of Congress and the federal government were smashing his beliefs one by one. Even the sacred Constitution can be trampled again and again. What else can't those tycoons and nobles do? Robinson walked out of the Parliament with a briefcase and came to Liang Zhao. Isn't it too hasty for the Parliament to hastily pass the decision to declare war on the federal government? Robinson sighed. Maybe everyone is angry now, and they voted in favor impulsively. Shouldn't we wait until everyone calms down before voting again? California now has a population of only nearly 100,000, less than a fraction of the United States. As for industry, there are only a few industrial and mining enterprises. That Liang Zhao just moved from the east to San Francisco. Ironically, California's originally unreasonable population structure has become California's advantage at this time. The war requires young and strong men far more than women and children, and the population of California is basically young and strong. Although California has a population of less than 100,000, if all of them are mobilized, they can also organize an armed force that exceeds the number of the U.S. Army. However, the strength gap is too great. Robinson still has no confidence in winning this war. Perhaps both sides should remain calm and sit down to talk? It is not passed hastily. This is the choice of the people. I believe that the result will be the same if there is another vote. Liang Zhao explained a few words to Elvis and then said to Robinson, "We are following the will of the people in California." Looking at the crowd of petitioners gathered in the square of San Francisco, Liang Zhao felt that the people of California could be used. Besides, this is a war of self-defense. Facing the seemingly powerful United States, he is not completely without a chance of winning. The infantry regiments of various states may not be willing to come to California to fight for the government and the congressmen. As for the dragoon regiment and the artillery regiment, first find a way to transport their war horses and cannons to California, otherwise even if they participate in the war, they can only participate as infantry. People, he also needs the American people to stand on his side, and he needs to use the American people's sympathy for California to put pressure on the government and Congress, forcing the federal government and Congress to bow. Fighting hard in California, defending San Francisco and Sacramento, and fighting a war of public opinion in the East, this is Liang Zhao's plan. If Texas is willing to continue to make trouble in New Mexico, it would be great. Liang Zhao called the reporter who took photos in the newspaper society and asked the reporter if the photos could be printed in the newspaper. During the Civil War, photos appeared in newspapers. It was also from this time that the public felt the cruelty of war more directly through images, which made the general public very disgusted with war for a long time after the Civil War. But later, people became numb after seeing too many photos of this kind, and gradually got used to it. Collins, a columnist for the California Daily, held a huge square wooden box with a leather case in his arms. This wooden box is the camera of this era, or a large format camera that Liang Zhao can't afford in the future. California definitely doesn't have this technology. I wonder if the big newspapers in the East have this technology. Do you want to record the tragic scenes in Los Angeles and publish them in the newspaper? Collins said, holding his precious camera like his own child. The shock brought by presenting the real picture to the public is not comparable to words. Liang Zhao expressed his thoughts. It is now 1850. If we work hard, we may be able to use the technology of the Civil War in advance. If you really can't do it, just develop more photos and send them to the gentlemen in Congress to let them see the good things they have done. I don't know whether the pictures can be printed in the newspaper, but if you are willing to make some concessions, you can settle for the second best and present the pictures in the newspaper in the form of prints. This technology is more mature and can definitely be done, but it requires making separate printing plates, which is more expensive. Collins' eyes lit up. The boss's vision is always so avant-garde and bold. As a journalist, he knows very well how much impact it will have on the industry if the pictures can be printed in newspapers. This is a great change from text media to real images. For journalists with conscience, authenticity is the life of news. No matter how much it costs, we must present the most real Los Angeles to the public. Money is not a problem, Liang Zhao said, the catchphrase that Collins was very familiar with. Understood, boss. Collins boldly took on this task. No one knows what the specific situation is in Los Angeles town now, and whether the thugs have left. However, he is willing to take risks for this big news, not only to present the truth to the public in the East, but also for his own status and influence in the news industry. I'll go with this reporter. Jerwin knocked on Liang Zhao's door and walked in. As a senator from California, his presence is very low. When talking about the senator of California, people first think of Fremont, a senator who was born in the military, has a hot temper and a distinctive personality. When Fremont returned to San Francisco, the citizens of San Francisco and even Sacramento were willing to brave the rain to come to the port to welcome Fremont, and regarded Fremont as a hero of California. Except for showing up a few times when organizing the campaign, Jerwin was more like a transparent person at other times. Jerwin also wanted to be a hero like Fremont. Mr. Fremont has outstanding military talents. If he stays in California, he can help you, Jerwin said to Liang Zhao. Congress also needs the voice of California legislators. As a senator from California, I have the responsibility to speak for California in Congress, Mr. Jerwin, I toast you a glass. Liang Zhao walked to the wine cabinet, opened a bottle of sherry, and poured a full glass to send Jerwin off. At this time, on the coast of California, Colonel Mason was riding a ship requisitioned from Los Angeles and sailing north to San Francisco. The United States has a navy, but the U.S. Navy is on the East Coast at this time. If Congress and the President decide to organize a fleet to be transferred to California now, this fleet will not appear in California on the West Coast until March or April next year at the earliest. Colonel, San Francisco is ahead. A lieutenant colonel next to Mason pointed to the port of San Francisco and said to Mason. Mason and other Army officers and soldiers were not used to riding ships. Moreover, the ships they requisitioned in Los Angeles were all small boats, which were very bumpy along the way. They suffered from seasickness after just a few days of sailing. They were relieved to hear that they had arrived in California, thinking that they could finally dock and leave these damn ships. Mason was not happy at all. Sherman had caused such a big mess in Los Angeles. I wonder if San Francisco has heard the news now. On the coastal defense artillery platform of Jinshan Bay, Liang Zhao was looking at the group of uninvited guests with binoculars. He had already prepared a generous gift for them. All the coastal defense guns had pointed their guns at the group of uninvited guests. It's still fun for everyone. Sartre, who was born in the artillery, excitedly operated the huge coastal defense gun. He looked at the boat that Mason and his men were riding with disdain and said, "These small fishing boats can't withstand a few shots. That depends on how accurate you are." Liang Zhao put down the telescope and said. To be honest, he had some doubts about the accuracy of the muzzle-loading smoothbore guns. As long as these coastal defense guns could drive Colonel Mason out of Jinshan Bay, his goal would be achieved. He did not expect these muzzle-loading smoothbore guns to sink many ships. Of course, if they could sink a few ships and send some American soldiers to the sea to feed the fish, that would be a good thing. Second update is here. Chapter 117, It is better to catch well than to hit accurately. You should trust the artillery of an old artilleryman. When I served in the Swiss artillery regiment, I was a famous gunner in the regiment. Sartre patted his chest and said confidently. He knew that the firing rate and accuracy of the muzzle-loading smoothbore gun were not satisfactory, but as long as he put these ships closer, he still had a chance to sink a few of them. Colonel, you should trust your old subordinates. We are the elite of the American Army. On the fishing boat, Lieutenant Colonel Liang also patted his chest and said to Colonel Mason with confidence. What a bullshit California Infantry Regiment. They are just a mob of militiamen. How can they be compared with the elite of our American regular army? We are the trump cards who have entered Mexico City. I heard that there are many Chinese in the California Infantry Regiment. What a joke. 10 years ago, the British had a few thousand soldiers who beat their hundreds of thousands of troops to pulp. Yes, yes. Colonel, don't hesitate, order a landing, the other officers on the ship echoed. The soldiers of the first company looted Los Angeles and made a small fortune, which made the officers and soldiers of other companies jealous. If they could enter San Francisco and Sacramento, two places full of gold, they would definitely make a fortune. The soldiers of the first company robbed. Why couldn't the soldiers of other companies rob? That was golden gold. Just a small piece of it would be their salary for several months. They urged Mason to dock as soon as possible and enter San Francisco. Shut up. Am I the commander or are you the commander? Colonel Mason shut up the officers. He was a rational and independent man. He knew very well that his subordinates were now a little out of control, and he had to maintain his absolute authority in the army. Looking at the cannon set up in Jinshin Bay, Mason knew that the good things Sherman did in Los Angeles had been exposed. He only had half a regiment of troops, so he had to be careful. Mason had his own judgment on Liang Zhao's California Infantry Regiment. Liang Zhao was able to wipe out Brandon's gang, which at least showed that the armed forces under Liang Zhao's command were not a mob that could withstand a single blow. It was just that they were infantrymen, and it was not a good thing for them to keep floating on the sea. Liang, you take an infantry company to explore the way. After landing, give this letter of mine to Colonel Liang. Be careful. If they have any hostile behavior, withdraw immediately. Colonel Mason thought for a moment, took out a letter that had been prepared long ago from his pocket and handed it to Liang. Yes. Colonel, Lieutenant Colonel Liang took Colonel Mason's letter and happily led a company to the port of San Francisco. Lieutenant Colonel Liang's joy did not last long. The coastal defense battery in Jinshin Bay opened fire on them without warning. His smile froze instantly, and he watched 7 or 8 huge shells hit his fleet. Turn around. Turn around. They're firing. Lieutenant Colonel Liang saw that the situation was not good and hurriedly ordered to turn the bow, ready to leave this ghost place and quickly escape from the range of the coastal defense guns. If Lieutenant Colonel Liang had not turned around, he might have been able to save his life. Sartre, who was standing on the coastal defense gun turret and observing the landing point of the shells, was a little disappointed because the shells he fired were a little off. To Sartre's surprise, the leading flagship turned around and caught his shells. This was really a pleasant surprise. Lieutenant Colonel Liang caught Sartre's shells accurately with his flesh and blood. Before Lieutenant Colonel Liang had time to dodge, the hot shells smashed his torso to pieces and completely lost consciousness. The hot shells with flesh and blood smashed through Lieutenant Colonel Liang's body and left a big hole in the bottom of the ship. Seawater continued to surge up through the big hole that was smashed through, and the hull was torn. This is just a small fishing boat, not a warship, and the structural strength is very fragile. The fishermen built this boat to go fishing, not to carry shells. The soldiers on the boat were frantically looking for anything that could block the hole. In a hurry, one soldier even pressed Colonel Liang's head against the hole to block the water, because the size of his head was just right. These army officers and soldiers were obviously not proficient in sailing. They could only use guns to threaten the fishermen who were dragged here to turn around quickly. Hurry up. Hurry up. You old man, if you get hit by another shell, we will all die here. The fishermen who were sailing wanted to cry but had no tears. Now we are against the wind, and the wind is not strong, so we can't go faster. The most feared thing for sailboats on the sea is not against the wind, but no wind. As long as the sails are properly operated, the ship can also sail forward in a Z-shaped route in the case of headwind, but it will not be as fast as with a wind. The worst situation is that the wind is small or there is no wind. In this case, the ship can only be driven by manpower to shake the oars. Wind is equivalent to coal on a steamship for sailboats. Paddle? Seeing that the wind was too weak, another fisherman gave up sailing and directly took the oars from the boat to try to paddle to turn the boat around. The soldiers on the boat rushed up and took the oars to start rowing, but unfortunately they not only did not know how to sail but also did not know how to paddle, and they rowed randomly. At this time, the coastal defense guns on the coastal defense battery had completed loading and fired a second round of artillery at them. With the first round of calibration, the accuracy of the second round of artillery fire was significantly improved, and 3 shells hit the fleet. One of the shells hit the side of the ship where Lieutenant Colonel Liang was sitting hard, and the wooden boards on the side of the ship were torn to pieces. The flying wood ships injured 4 or 5 soldiers who were rowing. "Well done." Liang Zhao couldn't help but pat the fence on the battery and exclaimed. These people were obviously not professional naval sailors, and the performance on the ship was very amateur. "Colonel, prepare the boat to go out of the harbor to capture prisoners." Sartre saw a fishing boat being sunk, and the soldiers and fishermen on the boat either put down the lifeboat or jump into the sea to survive. He was very satisfied with the effect of the bombardment. As long as these clumsy guys have not left the range of the cannon, and he's given a few more rounds of shooting opportunities, Sarko is even sure to sink all the ships within the range. "I hope we can catch a few more big fish." Liang Zhao nodded and ordered the flag signalman on the artillery platform to signal the San Francisco fishermen in the port to inform them to go out of the harbor to capture prisoners after the bombardment is over. As for the fleet watching from behind, Liang Zhao was not worried. Liang Zhao hoped that all these ships would enter the range of the coastal defense guns and then give them a head-on blow. In a fair duel on land with equal forces and equipment, Liang Zhao did not have full confidence in defeating Colonel Mason's troops. However, if Colonel Mason was willing to be a target, with Sartre, an excellent gunner, and his artillerymen, Liang Zhao was confident that he could call out Colonel Mason's fleet one by one. After the bombardment, there were 20 or 30 bodies floating on the sea outside the port of San Francisco, and the surviving soldiers scrambled for lifeboats. However, the number of lifeboats was limited, and the soldiers who were already on the lifeboats did not want to die, but just wanted to leave this ghost place as soon as possible. They did not hesitate to abandon their companions who had fought side by side with them. There was no harmony on the overloaded lifeboats. In order to survive, they even fought on the lifeboats, pushed their companions on the boats into the sea, and quickly rowed the lifeboats away. For those soldiers who wanted to swim to the lifeboats, the soldiers on the boats did not hesitate to point guns at them and threatened them to leave or even shoot directly. A non-commissioned officer who was quite good at swimming grabbed a paddle tightly and begged the rowing soldier to pull him up. The other soldiers on the lifeboat rudely used the oars to knock the poor sergeant into the sea. "My God, what are these soldiers of mine doing?" Colonel Mason, who witnessed this scene, could not believe that these soldiers who killed each other were his subordinates, and said bitterly. Chapter 118 Sneak Attack. The fishermen of San Francisco cast nets into the sea and fished up the American soldiers who fell into the water like fishing from the sea. The American soldiers did not care about their dignity at this time, and they wanted to get into the fishing nets themselves so that the fishermen could pull them onto the boat. In addition to the 28 American soldiers who were killed on the spot and drowned after falling into the water, the 31 American soldiers who were still able to struggle became Liang Zhao's prisoners. Unfortunately, Lieutenant Colonel Liang, the big fish, had been executed by artillery fire, and the highest rank among these prisoners was only a lieutenant. Captain Sherman, who Liang Zhao was most interested in, was not among these prisoners. The number of casualties and prisoners exceeded half, and it can be said that one of Colonel Mason's infantry companies has been abolished. The initial victory was a sensation in the entire city of San Francisco, and people took to the streets to tell each other and celebrate the victory. Liang Zhao ordered these prisoners to be paraded through the streets before being imprisoned. The anger of the people of San Francisco was the best torture for these prisoners. He believed that after the parade, these prisoners would be completely shattered. Liang Zhao judged that if Mason failed to land successfully at the port of San Francisco, he would definitely find a way to land somewhere else. The ships that Colonel Mason's troops were riding on were all small boats, so it was not difficult to find a suitable landing place. Liang Zhao could not set up defenses everywhere on the long California coastline, so he had to prepare for a land battle next. And land battles were exactly what Colonel Mason was good at. Liang Zhao did not have many cavalrymen under his command, so he summoned Sheriff Flagg and Deputy Sheriff K. Ming Shen and asked them to send out mounted police to monitor the every move of Colonel Mason's troops and report to them as soon as they learned of their landing location. As Liang Zhao expected, Mason and his troops landed on a beach 20 miles south of the port of San Francisco. After stepping on land, Colonel Mason finally felt a sense of security. Not long after Mason sat down, the sentry found clear horseshoe prints on the beach not far away and informed Mason of the news. "Colonel, there are enemy scouts. Our camp has been exposed. Be alert. Each company will take turns to stand guard for 2 hours tonight." The exhausted Mason gave the order, and the accompanying black servant handed Mason the brewed coffee. Although Mason and his men were very tired, he did not dare to relax his vigilance at this time. Mason did not drink the coffee, but just kept his hands on the hot coffee cup to keep warm. Since entering the army, Mason's military career has been very smooth, so smooth that he has become a little complacent. Mason's previous enemies, whether Indians or Mexicans, the army he commanded was invincible and had never tasted the taste of failure. Mason did not experience the Second Independence War that his fathers experienced, and he did not witness the humiliating scene of the Canadian Army rushing into Washington and burning the White House. He was a little bit unacceptable to today's defeat. The elite infantry regiment of the U.S. Army actually lost to newly established California Infantry Regiment. If this matter were heard by his colleagues, he, Mason, would probably become a laughingstock. God spares no one. He used to laugh at others, but he never thought that he, Mason, would become a laughingstock one day. Mason couldn't help but laugh at himself. The gunners on the Jinshin Bay Coastal Defense Battery were very accurate, and their artillery skills were no worse than those of the artillery regiment. Mason suspected that Liang Zhao had a professional artillery unit. Thinking of this, Mason became more worried. The journey from the U.S.-Mexico border to San Francisco was long, and he marched on foot all the way, carrying only light equipment with him. Although he had an artillery company, he did not bring the slow-moving artillery company with him this time. "Elvis, the time for you to take revenge has come. Colonel Mason and his troops have already landed and set up camp. I will give you the best soldiers and weapons now, and I hope you will not let me down." Liang Zhao summoned his Major Elvis to him. After learning that Colonel Mason had landed and set up camp, Liang Zhao decided to sneak attack their camp at night while the other side was exhausted. Liang Zhao would never choose to confront Colonel Mason openly if he could solve the problem by taking advantage of the situation and attacking him. As for the so-called gentlemanly manners, damn the gentlemanly manners. If Congress and the Eastern Consortium talked to him about gentlemanly manners and reason, they would not have preferred to violate the Constitution to take back the land donated by the Mexican government in California. "Thank you for your trust, Colonel. I will definitely not let you down." Elvis stood in an upright military posture, habitually turned his palms outward, and saluted Liang Zhao in a British military salute. Elvis had lost to Colonel Mason and Captain Sherman during the Mexican-American War. No, Sherman was still a lieutenant at that time. This matter has always been on Elvis' mind. As a former British Army officer, he would not feel ashamed to lose to the French and Prussians. But he felt greatly insulted to lose to the Americans whom he had always looked down on. Elvis had been looking for the reason for his failure before. While he blamed the failure on the Mexican army, which was in a hopeless situation, he also looked for reasons in himself and even questioned his command ability. Now he finally had a chance to prove himself again. "I will definitely capture Colonel Mason and Captain Sherman and send them to you," Elvis assured Liang Zhao before leaving. "Go ahead, I'll wait for your good news," Liang Zhao nodded and said. In the open space outside Tingtao Garden, Deng Yan had already assembled the army. In addition to the 700 regular troops of the California Infantry Regiment, there were also 400 private armed forces provided by local gold mining companies and farmers. Flag also took more than 130 mounted police to participate in this military operation to make up for the lack of cavalry. More than 1,200 armed forces are a terrifying military force in any state in the United States. Liang Zhao was still very confident that the 1,200 people who attacked Colonel Mason were less than half a regiment. The gold thrown into the army cannot be thrown in vain, and the bullets fed to these big-headed soldiers cannot be fed in vain. It was late at night when Elvis and Deng Yan reached the station of Colonel Mason's troops. Although Elvis and Deng Yan were very careful along the way, the noise made by more than 1,000 people marching could not escape the eyes and ears of the guards on duty. Sherman's company was responsible for the duty of guarding. Sherman's reaction was very quick, and he immediately organized the company to line up and fight back. When two brave men meet on a narrow road, the brave wins. Seeing that he had been discovered, Elvis immediately ordered to shoot back. The powerful firepower of more than 1,000 rifles quickly suppressed the firepower of Sherman's company. The shooting of Sherman's company was just scratching the surface for a team of more than 1,000 people. But the more than 1,000 rifles fired by Elvis and Ding Yan instantly crushed the morale of Sherman's company. The soldiers of Sherman's company fell down in unison like wheat harvested in autumn. In just one round of shooting, more than half of Sherman's company were killed or wounded. Retreat. Retreat to the camp. Sherman took a breath and hurriedly ordered to retreat to the camp. Due to the cover of night, Sherman only discovered the enemy's sneak attack at the first time. As for how many enemy troops came to attack, Sherman had no idea, so he dared to line up and fight back on the spot. After the enemy opened fire, Sherman determined the number of the attacking enemy. There were more than 1,000 people on the other side. More than a regiment of troops. It was undoubtedly a mantis trying to stop a chariot with just one company of his to block the enemy's attack of more than a regiment of troops. The fourth update is here. Think about it and try to write another chapter. The monthly votes have exceeded 300. Today's update does not count as extra chapters. The statistics of the chapters to be added will be released at noon tomorrow. Thank you all for your support. Chapter 119. I'm sorry, Colonel. Sherman fled back to the camp with the remaining 40-odd cavalrymen. Their camp was not so much a camp as a bunch of orderly arranged tents, but there was a fence around the tents. The biggest function of these fences, which could be smashed open with a rifle but with a little effort, was to bring a little self-deceiving psychological comfort to the soldiers in the camp. They landed at 4 o'clock this afternoon and did not have enough time to collect materials to build the camp. Just after entering the camp, Sherman heard a burst of gunfire like frying beans behind him. The enemy's loading speed was very fast, at least not slower than his soldiers. From this point alone, Sherman could judge that these enemies who came to attack were not untrained militias, nor were they a mob, but well-trained professional soldiers like them. It was impossible for a mob to maintain such a fast loading speed when facing a battle. Thinking that he was surrounded by more than a regiment of soldiers, Sherman, who was killing people like crazy, trembled a little. He and his soldiers quickly searched for horses. At this time, they didn't care who the horses belonged to. They would ride on any horse they could find. Even the pack horses pulling the baggage were untied and ridden. The purpose of their riding was not to prepare for battle, but to retreat more conveniently. To put it more bluntly, it was to escape. The dense gunfire woke Colonel Mason and his soldiers from their sleep. The soldiers picked up the guns that were beside them, and under the orders of the non-commissioned officers, they quickly formed a team and prepared to fight. Colonel Mason expected Liang Zhao to launch a sneak attack tonight, so he specially strengthened his vigilance so that he could react as quickly as possible when attacked. But Mason did not expect Liang Zhao to send so many people to launch a sneak attack. Judging from the gunfire, the other side had at least an infantry regiment. Is Liang Zhao's California Infantry Regiment going out in full force? He had already lost more than half of his company at sea during the day. He didn't know what the company on guard was like at the moment. If the company on guard had problems again, he would only have a little more than 3 companies of troops to use. Mason looked around. His camp was set up on a relatively open platform. Apart from more than 30 baggage wagons, there were no other shelters around. The 3 infantry companies quickly lined up in groups and began to fight back against the enemy in the dark under the orders of the company commanders. It was a dark and windy night. These panicked soldiers could not see where the enemy was. They could only shoot at the place where the gunfire came from, praying that they could hit the enemy. Soon, the enemy gave them a more fierce counterattack, and bullets rained down on their ranks. Almost every rank had 5 or 6 unlucky people who were shot and fell to the ground. This was only the enemy's first round of shooting. Mason's black servants ran to Mason crying. In the dark night, Colonel Mason could only see the eyes and white teeth of the black servants. "Sir, your horse has been stolen. Those damn guys. How dare they steal your horse?" Although in an extremely tense environment, the black servants' voices were still full of rhythm. "Where is Sherman? Where is Sherman?" Mason didn't care that his horse was ridden away. He looked around and didn't see a company of soldiers. Mason frowned and grabbed a major named Oliver to ask where Sherman was now. Captain Sherman, who was in charge of the guard, suffered heavy casualties, and Captain Sherman is missing, the major said indignantly. He guessed that Sherman must have escaped first. "Sherman, this guy, usually calls me a brother, But he didn't take me with him when he ran away at the critical moment. Sherman, this deserter? Colonel Mason gritted his teeth and said, he hated deserters the most in his life. But he couldn't care about Sherman now, he still had to command his army to fight back. Colonel, Sherman came out from nowhere with a horse under his crotch and the reins of another horse in his hand. Colonel, get on the horse quickly. There are too many enemies. We can't stop the enemy with our limited force. The major guessed correctly that Sherman wanted to escape, but before escaping, Sherman decided to take Colonel Mason with him. Colonel Mason was the highest commander here, and as long as he took Colonel Mason with him, Sherman would not be considered a deserter. Of course, Colonel Mason's kindness to Sherman was also the reason why Sherman decided to come back and take Colonel Mason with him. While they were talking, the other side fired another round of shots at them. After the gunshots, the screams of the soldiers who were shot and fell to the ground reached Sherman's ears. Sherman knew that the 3 companies of infantry would soon be unable to hold on, and he had to hurry. Sherman, are you going to be a deserter? Mason scolded Sherman harshly. I now order you to gather all the soldiers you can to stand by my side. For the first time, Sherman refused to carry out Colonel Mason's order. This made Mason very angry. Mason pulled out the pistol from his waist. Sherman, if you dare to be a deserter, I will shoot you, Oliver. Do you want to die here? Sherman raised his hands and winked at Major Oliver next to Colonel Mason. Smart Oliver understood. I'm sorry, Colonel. I hope you can forgive me. I'm also thinking about your life safety. The desire to survive overcame Oliver's of Colonel Mason. Oliver mustered up the courage to take down the gun of his superior, and then pushed Colonel Mason onto the warhorse. Of course, he also rode on the horseback and rode on the same warhorse with Colonel Mason. Sherman, Oliver, you two bastards. Do you know what you are doing now? Colonel Mason roared angrily. Put me down, you cowards. Deserters. I will fight the enemy to the death. Sherman and Oliver ignored Mason. They quickly disappeared into the twilight under the cover of more than 20 cavalrymen. The desperate voices of Mason's black servants came from behind them. Gentlemen, please take us with you. But no one paid attention to these black servants. They couldn't take care of themselves, so how could they care about the life and death of these black servants? After Colonel Mason left, the morale of the 3 infantry companies that had been struggling with the last bit of faith finally collapsed. Their casualties had exceeded 1/5, and the Supreme Commander disappeared at this time. The Supreme Commander disappeared, and the 3 captains and company commanders had no intention of staying to continue commanding the army. They also wanted to survive. Colonel Mason had abandoned them and fled, and they had lost the reason to stay and continue fighting. The 5th update is completed. Thank you for your subscription support. Chapter 120 Prisoners and Visitors from England and France. The counterattack from the camp suddenly stopped, which surprised Elvis, Deng Yen and others. Colonel Mason's troops collapsed too quickly, so quickly that Elvis and Deng Yen could not believe it. Neither Elvis nor Deng Yen were people who were greedy for merit and reckless, and they were both cautious. It was Fuffledge who seemed very anxious. Liang Zhao had promised them in advance that anyone who captured Colonel Mason alive would get a bounty of 800 ounces of gold. Since Sherman was the creator of the Los Angeles massacre, although he was only a captain, Liang Zhao also offered him a bounty of 700 ounces of gold. In addition to these 2 main targets, the bounties of other prisoners were calculated according to their military ranks. Even ordinary soldiers had a bounty of 20 ounces of gold. Before the discovery and development of new large gold mining areas, California's gold production was generally declining slowly. Scarcity makes things valuable. The same ounce of gold is now more valuable than it was 6 months ago. Flagg had served in the army and retired with the rank of colonel. He knew that the results achieved in hunting down fleeing soldiers were far greater than those achieved in fighting. And his cavalry had a greater advantage than the infantry of the California Infantry Regiment in hunting down fleeing soldiers. Elvis and Deng Yen were skeptical and suspected that there was a trick. The light at night was very dim, and they didn't know whether the enemy in the camp was setting an ambush or had really fled. Elvis sent some scouts to conduct reconnaissance, while stabilizing the formation of his own troops and slowly advancing towards Colonel Mason's camp. Sir, the enemy has fled. Soon, the scouts brought back exciting news that Colonel Mason's troops had fled. Chase, Elvis and Deng Yen gave the order to pursue without hesitation. Flagg and his cavalry had already ridden out, and those fleeing soldiers were now golden in their eyes. In Tingtao Garden, Liang Zhao had been sleepless all night, and he was a little nervous. This was the first battle he commanded, and it was also the most critical battle in California. This battle is of great significance to California. If they win, the federal government will not be able to send troops to directly threaten California in the short term. Even if the federal government sends troops, Liang Zhao believes that with the previous experience of Colonel Mason, the commanders of infantry regiments in other states will weigh their own weight before sending troops to California to fight Liang Zhao. Most people are bullies who are afraid of the strong. If he fails to defeat Mason in this battle, it will be a different story. Even without waiting for the orders of the government and Congress, the commanders of infantry regiments in other states will take the initiative to ask to send troops to California. There is no other reason. The gold in California is too tempting. Liang Zhao flipped through the second letter sent to him by President Fillmore. Although he is the president, Fillmore's tone in the letter to Liang Zhao is very humble, without any arrogance, which makes people feel very happy. After all, Fillmore is a politician who climbed from the bottom to the presidency. He is more smooth and flexible in dealing with people. It is no wonder that all parties were able to reach an agreement and pass the compromise bill in just 2 months under the mediation of President Fillmore. You know, this is something President Taylor failed to do in 8 months. The prominent figures in California gathered in the reception room of Tingtao Garden and passed around the letter written by the president to Liang Zhao and Robinson, while waiting for the war report from the front. They wanted to know the latest news as soon as possible, so that they could make the most favorable choice based on the facts. At least the president supports us, Sartre handed the letter to the impatient Jim after reading it. The dignitaries who had read the letter nodded and agreed with Sartre's point of view. The president once told me that as long as more than 1/3 of the Senate votes against it, he would veto the bill submitted by Calhoun, Fremont said with his legs crossed. So far, according to the latest news we have received, under pressure from the people, the Senate had to hold a second vote. Although the result of the second vote was still unsatisfactory, the number of senators supporting us has increased significantly. This is a good sign. Liang Zhao picked up a cup of coffee and took a few sips to refresh himself. As long as we stick to our position, I think we will soon be able to get enough votes against this bill. Unknowingly, the east was getting light and the sky was already dawning. Liang Zhao invited these friends who had not slept all night like him to have breakfast together. Just after breakfast, a signalman came to report the latest situation on the front line to Liang Zhao. We won. This short sentence excited everyone. They defeated half of the elite infantry regiment of the U.S. Army. In the afternoon, Elvis, Deng Yan, and others escorted the captured prisoners and reported the results of the battle to Liang Zhao. 128 enemy soldiers were killed and 287 enemy soldiers were captured. The only regret was that the remaining dozens of enemy soldiers ran away, and Sherman also ran away. But fortunately, they still caught 2 big fish, Colonel Mason and Major Oliver. Because the 2 were riding on the same horse, the horse was overwhelmed and moved slowly, so they were caught by Flagg and several of his mounted policemen. In other words, the officers above the colonel level brought by Colonel Mason this time were either killed in battle or captured. The enemy also suffered certain casualties, including those incurred when capturing prisoners. A total of 74 people were killed and 165 were injured. Among them, 27 people were trampled by their own people in the process of chasing the fleeing soldiers at night. 2 unlucky people were trampled to death by their own people. Fortunately, the casualties caused by the trampling came from the private armed forces provided by those gold mining companies and organizations, not from Liang Zhao's California Infantry Regiment. Sure enough, there is still a gap between professionally trained armed forces and private armed forces. Colonel Mason, I'm sorry, Sheriff Flagg, please uncuff Colonel Mason. He is not a criminal and should not be treated like this. Sutter and Colonel Mason had a friendship and asked Flagg to uncuff Colonel Mason. For Sutter's sake, Flagg still uncuffed Colonel Mason. He is the criminal. Fremont disagreed with Sartre's statement. He said coldly, Colonel Mason, your troops are really extraordinary. They actually massacred innocent people in Los Angeles. It is really a disgrace to the U.S. Army. You will pay the price for your crimes. Fremont, who also came from the Army, hated the crimes committed by Colonel Mason's troops in Los Angeles. Fremont walked to Colonel Mason and handcuffed him again, thinking that Colonel Mason was not qualified to remove the shackles. You have also served as the commander of California. Don't you have any sympathy for the residents of Los Angeles? How could you do it? During the war, They provided a lot of help to the U.S. Army. Mason did not choose to defend himself, because what Fremont said was indeed the truth. During the Mexican-American War, the early American immigrants in California did provide them with great help. Although the atrocities against Los Angeles were committed by Sherman, as Sherman's boss, Mason did need to be responsible for this matter. "I'm sorry," Colonel Mason said, eclipsed. He looked at the yellow-skinned colonel who was walking slowly towards him. The colonel was about 6 feet tall and looked very young, even a little immature. Perhaps this was the youngest colonel in the United States. Mason was somewhat unwilling to accept losing to such a young opponent. "Are you Colonel Liang?" asked Colonel Mason, who was a prisoner. "That's right, Colonel Mason. I know you are unwilling to accept it," Liang Zhao said to Mason unceremoniously. "Before you killed the people of Los Angeles, I always thought you were a respectable soldier. Unfortunately, I was wrong. Not only did you degenerate and become a running blog, you became an executioner and a war criminal. I am a soldier, I am just following orders," Mason argued. "Is killing civilians also following orders?" Liang Zhao said disdainfully, and then waved his hand and ordered Mason and the prisoners to be imprisoned. These prisoners will be his bargaining chips at the negotiation table in the future. In the evening, 2 guests from afar visited San Francisco. 2 steamships, flying the Union Jack of the British Empire and the blue, white and red flag of the French Second Republic, entered the port of San Francisco. Liang Zhao had expected the arrival of Britain and France. Fremont told him that before he returned to California, he had visited the 2 ambassadors in private at the British and French embassies. But Liang Zhao did not expect that Britain and France were so enthusiastic about America's domestic affairs that they came earlier than the American government. "They should be sent by the embassy," Fremont said, looking at the Union Jack and the tricolor flag fluttering in the wind. "It seems that the 2 ambassadors are very concerned about what happened in California," Liang Zhao said with his hands behind his back. At this time, the transatlantic cable of the United States had not yet been laid, and the efficiency of information transmission between North America and Europe was not high. Mailing letters was still the way of communication between the 2 continents. The speed of information transmission depends on the speed of transoceanic mail ships. The spokespersons of Britain and France came so early, and they must not have received instructions from the top leaders of the 2 countries. It should be the intention of the ambassadors of the 2 countries to the United States. It must be said that Britain and France were still very flexible in their foreign policies at this time, giving their ambassadors abroad considerable power. "I care too much? I visited them just to chat with them and pretend to show them to Congress," Fremont frowned and said. "I never mentioned anything about California to them. No matter what you talk to them about, your status as a California senator is enough to make them think about it. What's more, it is already known in the United States that California and the Washington Congress are not in harmony." Liang Zhao stared at the port. "Get ready to welcome guests from Britain and France. Overtime today, it's hard to bear. Sorry for the late update. I will continue to update after get off work. I dare not slack off today." Chapter 121, The Thoughts of Britain and France. The 19th century, the comprehensive national strength of Britain and France was much stronger than that of the United States. The British Empire, known as the sun never sets, has the world's largest colonies and the most powerful navy. France is the most powerful country on the European continent, with the most powerful army in Europe and even in the world. After all, Fremont is still a young politician without much political experience. He contacted the ambassadors of Britain and France just to show Congress a superficial article, and did not think about having substantive cooperation with Britain and France. These 2 countries are the masters who will not get up early without profit, and the ambassadors of the 2 countries are more shrewd than each other. How can they be willing to act as a dispensable tool? What they want is real benefits, which is why Liang Zhao does not want to contact the British and French high level too early. Liang Zhao received 2 guests in Tingtao Garden. One of them was Gibson, a banker of the British Bank of Barings, and the other was Legoff, a banker of the Bank of France. It seems that Britain and France are still relatively restrained in the United States, and no one from the embassy has direct contact with him. After a simple self-introduction, Liang Zhao began to negotiate with the 2 British and French bankers. Liang Zhao was no stranger to the Bank of Bahrain and the Bank of France. 4 years ago was the golden age of the American Democrats, and the President Polk was an ambitious president. Polk was keenly aware at the time that if the United States wanted to become an influential power, it could not be content with the Atlantic coast, but must achieve effective control over the Pacific coast. To achieve this, it was necessary to achieve postal service between the Oregon region, California had not yet been annexed by the United States at that time, and the eastern states. The best postal route is the Panama route operated by the Pacific Mail Shipping Company of Aspinwall. At that time, the Democratic-led Congress and the State Department had completed contact with the government of the Republic of New Granada, roughly equivalent to today's Colombia, and decided to dig a canal in the Panama province of the Republic of New Granada. At that time, the Mexican-American War coincided with the territorial disputes between Canada and the United States, which intensified. President Polk, who always had a tough attitude towards foreign affairs, even shouted out the radical slogan 54-40 or fight when facing the territorial disputes between the northwest border and the British Canadian colonies. The British authorities believed that if the Oregon region and the eastern United States achieved postal service, it would damage the interests of their Canadian colonies, so they entangled France to ruin the cooperation between the United States and New Granada. The main participants in this matter were the Bank of Bahrain and the Bank of France. They made an estimate of more than $10 million for the canal, forcing the Americans who were willing to dig the Panama Canal to stay away. At the same time, they told the New Granada government that the United States could not come up with more than $10 million, but Britain and France could, so the New Granada Republic was more inclined to cooperate with Britain and France, which had stronger financial strength. At that time, the United States was at war with Mexico, so it naturally could not come up with more than $10 million, and the wealthy people in the United States could not come up with $10 million, so the matter had to be abandoned in the end. After the United States gave up digging the Panama Canal, when the government of the New Granada Republic urged Britain and France to dig the canal again, Britain said that the project was too difficult and unfeasible. This made the New Granada Republic very angry and felt that it had been fooled. I would like to say hello to you on behalf of His Excellency the Ambassador, Mr. Liang. Although Robinson was the governor, Gypsy, who had been paying attention to California for a long time, had long known that Liang Zhao was the one who really controlled California. The ambassador had already met with Senator Fremont earlier. The ambassador and I deeply sympathize with the experience of the California Republic. I deeply admire the spirit of the California people fighting for freedom. I would like to do my best to support the California people in resisting tyranny and striving for independence. When passing by the square, Gypsy noticed that there was no stars and stripes in the square, only the bear flag symbolizing the California Republic. Gypsy mistakenly thought that this was California's War of Independence and was ecstatic. California was a territory that the United States had just annexed from Mexico 2 years ago. It was legally reasonable for Californians to seek independence. Wars require money, a lot of money. During the Mexican-American War, the Bank of Bahrain provided loans to the American government while clearing the inventory of the British Empire and selling outdated weapons to Mexico, which was short of weapons, at a high price. It can be said that it made a lot of money. The Bank of France also made a lot of money in the Mexican-American War, but the French mainly supported the United States and did not make as much as the British. The British supported both countries and even sent British officers to help the Mexicans train their army because they hoped that the war could last longer. The British were very happy to see that the United States' national strength was consumed by the blood of the Mexicans. It was just that Mexico was so weak that it lost its capital in less than 2 years, but the performance of the U.S. military in this war was also relatively poor. The United States was able to win thanks to the excellent matching mechanism of the American region. France, on the other hand, wanted the powerful United States to make things difficult for the British, because Britain supported Prussia in Europe to make things difficult for France. Both sides knew what the other was thinking, but such things that were easy to tear apart could not be brought to the table. Although Britain and France secretly disliked each other, on the surface, they still maintained a harmonious appearance. Mr. Gibson, since you have acknowledged that Mr. Fremont is a senator of the United States Senate, how can there be a California Republic? This is just a war for Californians to defend their rights, not a war of independence. Liang Zhao had long seen through Gibson's conspiracy, and he explained the nature of this war to Gibson. It's not that he didn't have the idea of independence, but the time for independence has not come yet. California does not have a complete industrial system to support a long-term modern war. At present, the cohesion of Californians is limited to defending California and the property. It is Liang Zhao's wishful thinking to want them to follow him to expand the territory. He still needs more time to increase the cohesion of Californians and their sense of identity. Liang Zhao can flirt with Britain and France to make Congress and Washington officials feel nervous and stressed. But he will never fight for Britain and France to the last Californian. Gibson and Liang looked at each other, and Liang Zhao's answer was beyond their expectations. This young man seemed very sober, so sober enough to resist the temptation of the presidency of the Republic. Is he really willing to be a deputy governor who manipulates everything behind the scenes? Ahem, don't get me wrong, we just sympathize with the plight of Californians, Liang coughed twice to ease the awkward situation. We are bankers and come to California to look for business opportunities. But if you need weapons, we are also happy to provide them. We also have our own channels. Liang did not know that half of Colonel Mason's infantry regiment had been eliminated by Liang Zhao. He felt that the current situation in California was not very clear, and Paris had not made clear instructions on the matter. Liang decided to wait and see. As long as you abide by the laws of this state, we welcome businessmen and entrepreneurs from any country to invest in California, Liang Zhao said. As for weapons, as long as the weapons you provide are advanced enough, I can buy some weapons to arm the California Infantry Regiment. Great, can I conduct an inspection in California? Liang asked. Gibson's purpose in coming to California was very clear, that is, to instigate the American Civil War. At the beginning of the year, when the North and South of the United States were at loggerheads, the British authorities secretly rejoiced, thinking that a large-scale civil war was about to break out in the United States. The capitalists in London even prepared war bonds for the United States. However, in July, after the new President Fillmore came to power, he quickly mediated the contradictions between the North and the South and eased the tense relationship between the two sides. Fillmore successfully facilitated the passage of the Compromise Bill in September, which saved the United States from civil war. This disappointed the London authorities across the ocean. The disagreement between California and the United States Congress gave them hope of reigniting the fuse of the American Civil War. This was the purpose of Simpson's commission to come to California. Liang's purpose of coming to California was not as clear as Simpson's. Although Paris did not make a clear statement and instructions on the matter, Liang also knew that a stronger America was in the interests of France at present. Every second has the ambition to become the first. France coveted Britain's position as the world hegemon, but France's comprehensive national strength, especially the navy, was far behind Britain. France needs a partner with the strength to contain Britain. If California is worth investing in, French capital represented by the Bank of France can enter California and participate in local development, which is a great gain for Liang. Of course, I will let my assistant take you to California as your guide later. Liang Zhao said. Chapter 122A to Los Angeles. With a heavy responsibility, Gwen arrived at the devastated town of Los Angeles on a small steamer loaded with food, daily necessities and tools. Accompanying him was Collins, a columnist for the California Daily. After landing, Gwen could not believe his eyes. Nearly two-thirds of the buildings in Los Angeles were damaged to varying degrees, and half of the buildings were burned down. Is this what the army of a civilized country in the 19th century could do to the residents of its own town? Gwen felt like he had come to the barbaric and ignorant Middle Ages. He was born, raised and worked in Ohio, and was a native Ohioan. However, he had already bought a mansion and property in California, and the monthly dividends of more than $80,000 from the United Mining Company made him not too attached to his hometown of Ohio. Ohio left Gwen with far more bad things than good memories. Just like the Europeans who immigrated to America and made a fortune in America, they did not have much nostalgia for their former homeland on the European continent, because they had not lived well in Europe. Of course, they would choose to return home after they became rich, but the purpose of their return was not out of nostalgia for their hometown. Instead, they just wanted to show off to their fellow villagers who once looked down on them. After showing off, they would still return to America. Gwen ordered his servants to load food, daily necessities and tools onto the carriage and pull them to the unrecognizable Los Angeles town square. This was also where the tragedy began. There were dried bloodstains on the land of the square, and the air was still filled with a strong smell of blood. The smell of blood and the smell of rotten meat mixed together and penetrated into Gwen's nose, making Gwen feel very uncomfortable. But Gwen still insisted on coming to the square of Los Angeles town. Only by contacting the local residents face-to-face could he narrow the distance between them and let them remember that there was a senator named Gwen in California. Collins and his assistant set up the tripod, and then he installed the camera on the tripod and adjusted the correct exposure parameters according to the light environment of the surrounding environment. After completing the composition, Collins put his head into the cloth cover, and the inverted image of the collapsed church next to the square appeared in the viewfinder. It's just that the image in the viewfinder is blurry. The photographic equipment of this era was just starting out, and it was not possible to achieve what you see is what you get, which was a great test of the photographer's photography skills. After everything was ready, Collins pressed the shutter and completed the shooting of the first photo. Then Collins took a few more photos near the square. When the priests and nuns of the church saw that reporters had come to Los Angeles to investigate, they immediately surrounded Collins and accused him of the atrocities of the U.S. Army. Wilkes, a pastor in Los Angeles, took Collins to a new public cemetery and pointed at the cemetery and the coffins and corpses piled next to the cemetery and accused Collins. Mr. Reporter, you must make their atrocities public. A total of 345 innocent town residents were killed by them, and more than 100 of them were women and children who had no ability to resist. Sherman killed so many people that there were not enough coffins in the entire town of Los Angeles, and many bodies have not been buried yet. No one would have thought that more than 300 people would die in a town with a population of only more than 1,000 people in a month. When cholera was at its worst, only a dozen people died of cholera every day in Los Angeles. Yes, I will. Collins pressed the shutter with tears in his eyes and took more than a dozen photos of the cemetery in succession. In the end, he did not forget to take a few close-up photos of the bodies that were burned to the point where their identities were almost unrecognizable. Are you Senator? Thank God, someone finally cares about Los Angeles, sir. They have captured our brave mayor of Los Angeles. All the food in my family was taken away by those villains. They didn't leave me a penny, and my fishing boat. They requisitioned my fishing boat, and my father was also conscripted by them. Without a fishing boat, I can't go out to sea to fish. I can't live without fishing. It's really worrying. My house was also burned down by those thugs, and now our whole family lives in a stable. There is no food either. I haven't had a full meal for 4 days. I don't even have the strength to make a coffin. My husband's leg was injured by them, and the wound has festered. The doctor in Los Angeles was also taken away by those thugs. I don't know what to do now. In the square of Los Angeles town, the surviving local residents tearfully accused Sherman and others of their atrocities. Their lives have been forced into a desperate situation, and Gwen's arrival has given them hope. They still have the state government, and perhaps the state government can help them through the difficulties. Jerwin took out a notebook and a pen, and took notes carefully. He promised the residents of Los Angeles, "As a senator of California, I will definitely do justice for you and give you justice. I also understand your current difficulties. As Los Angeles is part of California, the state government will not forget your suffering. Deputy Governor Liang Zhao and I have brought some food supplies for your emergency. In addition, we have also brought some doctors to help you. Of course, this is not all. This time, Jerwin did not just make verbal promises to the people like he did when he was a congressman in Ohio, but provided real help to the poor residents of Los Angeles. Oh, my God, it's so great. Thank you, state government. Thank you, Congressman Jerwin. Thank you, Deputy Governor Liang. Will the state government provide us with help in the future?" The residents cast expectant eyes at Jerwin and asked eagerly. "Of course. After defeating the enemy, the state government will help you rebuild your home. Governor Robinson and his people are already raising supplies for you. Subsequent aid will continue to arrive in Los Angeles. Los Angeles will not only be rebuilt, but it will also be more prosperous than before," Jerwin said very confidently. Although the California state government has just been established for less than 3 months, Jerwin feels that this young state government is far more capable than the state government of his hometown of Ohio. "Now everyone line up, register here and receive the supplies you need." After saying that, Jerwin put away his pen and notebook. After distributing these supplies, he still has to go to Washington, where there are more important things waiting for him to do. The news of Sherman's massacre of Los Angeles residents first spread to Texas, and then quickly spread to the eastern states through telegrams from the Houston Telegraph Office. The whole country of America was in an uproar, and the angry crowd took to the streets again. This time, they were not just protesting. The marching crowd even gathered in Washington, D.C., and attacked the Capitol. In order to maintain order and protect the safety of Congress and the government, Washington, D.C. mobilized all security forces in the D.C. to Capitol Hill to prevent the situation from escalating further. The gold diggers who once boarded the ship to California with shovels and gold pans now boarded the ship with rifles and even cannons. They claimed that they would go to California to fight with Californians and support Californians in defending their freedom. The New York government was extremely nervous about this. The local state legislature pressured the state government to block the ports of New York State and prohibit these crazy people from going to California. But New York State could only block the ports of the state. These volunteers who threatened to support California did not give up their plan to go to California. They gathered and left New York State, went to New Haven and New London and neighboring Connecticut, and boarded the ship to California. Not long after the news of the Los Angeles massacre came, Colonel Mason was captured and half of his regiment was annihilated in San Francisco. The day the news came was Christmas, and people took to the streets to celebrate. But they were not celebrating the grand holiday of Christmas, but celebrating the defeat of the American army. The American people celebrated the defeat of the American army, which was the first time in American history. When Congress learned that Colonel Mason's troops were annihilated and even he was captured, the members were shocked. They still underestimated California's military strength. Senators from New York are discussing submitting a bill to send more troops to California. This time, many members shook their heads and disagreed with sending more troops to California. Colonel Mason's infantry regiment was already a relatively elite infantry regiment in the U.S. Army, and it was annihilated in less than a day. It can be seen that California is not easy to mess with. Besides, California is not the only place in the United States that needs troops. The border issue between the United States and Canada has not been perfectly resolved, and garrisons are needed in conflict areas. New settlements in the Midwest need garrisons to encircle and suppress Indians to ensure the safety of immigrants and ensure the development of the Midwest hinterland. There is also the problem of Texas sending more troops to New Mexico, which is also a headache. In order to force the Texans to withdraw from New Mexico, the federal government must have a relatively large army to maintain deterrence against Texas. The U.S. Army now only has 14 infantry regiments, except the California Infantry Regiment and the Texas Infantry Regiment. Of course, if the regular army is not enough, they can also consider recruiting militia and volunteers to fight. But this time is different from the Mexican-American War. In the Mexican-American War, everyone fought for the country and occupied more territory. Therefore, the states and the people of each state will unite and respond to the government's call to fight for the country. California is different from Mexico. It is now a state in the United States. Now public opinion is overwhelmingly on the side of California. Even if the conscription order is issued, it is estimated that there will be few responses. Many sober congressmen are not optimistic about recruiting militia and volunteer troops to California to participate in the war. Secretary of War Conrad solemnly stated to Congress that the War Department opposed the Civil War and would not consider withdrawing any troops to California. This is also what President Fillmore meant. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 123 President's Wrath. Fillmore was very angry. The development of the situation had completely exceeded his expectations. Before Colonel Mason set out, he and the War Department repeatedly emphasized in the order conveyed to Colonel Mason that he could not open fire. But what was the result? The little captain named Sherman under Colonel Mason not only opened fire, but also massacred civilians in Los Angeles, pushing the entire federal government to the opposite side of the people. In the more than 70 years since the founding of the country, the image of the federal government has never been so bad. If this matter cannot be properly handled, Fillmore will not be re-elected, and he may be the worst president in the history of the United States. Fillmore thought of himself as a person who could not be surprised by changes. After all, over the years, he had walked step by step from a tenant farmer to the president. What kind of storms and waves has he not seen? But this time, he was at a loss in the face of an unmanageable situation. The War Department and Congress bypassed us and wrote several letters to Colonel Mason. Congressman Calhoun also wrote to Colonel Mason in his personal name. In the presidential office of the White House, Secretary Conrad expressed his views to Fillmore. He believed that the government and the War Department should not be held responsible for this matter. Congress and the War Department bypassed the President and the War Department to send letters to Colonel Mason, which was the culprit of this tragedy. Fillmore was very angry about the Congress's disregard. If Congress had not insisted on its own way, the situation would not have become so difficult to deal with. Arrest Sherman and hand him over to the military court for trial. We need to give an explanation to the victims in California and Los Angeles. Fillmore took a puff of his pipe to ease his current bad mood. Sherman, the culprit, must be dealt with seriously, even if he is sent to the gallows. Fillmore has checked Sherman's information. He is an outstanding graduate of the West Point Military Academy and has made many military achievements during the Mexican-American War. He is a very promising young man. However, his excellence and military achievements are not enough to offset the crimes he committed in Los Angeles. There is also the Department of the Army, which is a traitor. It also needs to be dealt with seriously, otherwise the ministers of other departments will not take him seriously as the president. Fillmore must kill the chicken to scare the monkeys. The Secretary and Deputy Secretary of the Department of the Army should be dismissed on the spot, and an investigation team should be set up to seriously investigate which other officials of the Department of the Army are involved in this matter, Fillmore said. What about Congressman Calhoun? Congressman Calhoun is already seriously ill and his mind is a little unclear. I don't think he is suitable to serve as a member of the Senate again. Conrad has long had opinions about Congressman Calhoun, who always takes advantage of his seniority. He hopes to take this opportunity to drive this old guy out of Congress. Fillmore also wants to do so. Sometimes he even feels that these congressmen who take advantage of their seniority in Congress are stumbling blocks on the road to progress of this country and need to be removed. But he is the president and cannot touch Congressman Calhoun. Moreover, as a veteran congressman, Calhoun's influence in Congress is too great. So big that even the ridiculous bills he proposed are supported by young congressmen. In the eyes of some young congressmen, their own future is far more important than the future of the United States. However, he believed that after this incident, Calhoun, who had already lost his reputation, would soon lose his Senate qualification and get out of the Senate. Let this old congressman who has lost his integrity go, Fillmore said calmly. Calhoun, the old delivery man, was getting worse day by day, and he didn't have many days left. He didn't need to bother with a dying man, so as not to cause trouble and have a negative impact on himself. Mr. Webster, I heard that Wall Street has sold all the land in California. Fillmore put down his pipe and looked at Secretary of State Webster beside him. Yes, Mr. President, all sold. Webster was old and his health was not very good. He leaned on the soft sofa and answered Fillmore's question. They are really anxious. Do they really think that the California government does not exist? Fillmore said with a sneer. If California was a territorial area, it would be easy to say. After all, the land in the territorial area was nominally under federal jurisdiction. But now California has its own state government. Legally, these lands should belong to the California government. Those people still ignored the existence of the California government and rushed to buy California land on Wall Street. It was too arrogant. This is the list of successful bidders. You can take a look. Webster was not able to stand up. He handed the unopened file bag in his hand to the assistant beside him and asked the assistant to pass it to the president. The Secretary of the Treasury asked me to pass this document to you. The Treasury is now raising compensation for Texas. I hope Texas can withdraw its troops from New Mexico after receiving the compensation. It's too late to raise compensation for Texas now. Let the Treasury save money. Fillmore opened the file bag, took out the documents inside and read them. The names on it were all old faces. Most of the bidders for these lands were old nobles in New York State. Some families in Connecticut, Massachusetts, Washington, D.C. and Virginia also participated in this matter. However, there were not many families and consortiums in other states participating in this matter. The families and consortiums in these states did not get as much land as those old nobles in New York in this land bidding. It can be seen that the old nobles in New York State still dominated this matter. Fillmore continued to read, and when he saw the last line, he could no longer control his anger. $8.76 million. In the eyes of these people, the land in California that was buried with gold was only worth $8.76 million. In other words, even if the entire California was sold to these people, it would not be enough to pay the compensation for Texas. The government promised to give Texas $10 million in compensation for the land. These nobles are really generous. These guys who have to write about the newspapers for reducing the rent of the poor in the slums of New York City by 15 cents have never disappointed people. They are willing to pay $8.76 million for the land in California, and there is gold buried under those lands. Fillmore angrily slammed the documents in his hand on the desk. It is now rumored that among the gold diggers in California, Liang Zhao alone is now worth more than $10 million, becoming the first multimillionaire in the West. This does not include other gold diggers. What is the concept of $10 million? At present, there are only 2 people in the United States who can be confirmed to be worth more than $10 million. One is Buckhouse, also known as Little Astor, from the Astor family, a big landlord in New York, and the other is Vanderbilt, a New York shipping tycoon known as the Commodore. If the rumors are true, Liang Zhao will be the 3rd multimillionaire in American history, but considering that Liang Zhao holds a large amount of gold, Liang Zhao may have more liquid funds than the 2 veteran multimillionaires. After all, land is the main asset of the Astor family. Buckhouse will not keep a lot of money in the bank, but will exchange his money for land. Vanderbilt also has a large part of his assets in ships and investment company shares, and the cash in his hands will never exceed $10 million. Although these 2 are not multimillionaires, they have more fixed assets. And it is very troublesome to realize fixed assets. Fuck, Webster, who has always been mature and prudent and pays great attention to his image, couldn't help but swear when he learned the figure of $8.76 million. He knew that it would not be so smooth to reclaim the land in California. He was very rational and did not participate in this matter. Webster expected that the land in California would not sell for much, but he was surprised that he could not even get $10 million. Let Congress continue to make trouble. I choose to stand on the side of California. According to the Constitution, we should also stand on the side of California. The United States government respects and protects citizens' legal private property. The image of the president and the government was very bad. Outside the Capitol Hill, waves of protests and vulgar words reached Fillmore's ears. He decided to take the risk to convey his views to these protesters and give them a speech. Perhaps in the re-election campaign, today's adventure could win him some votes. Mr. Webster, I'm sorry, I think it's time to calm the anger of the people. I need to draft a speech to the protesters outside the Capitol Hill later. Indeed, the situation needs to be calmed down quickly, even if it costs a lot. Webster agreed with Fillmore's point of view. The British and French ambassadors are particularly concerned about what happened in California. I heard that they have sent people to contact California. This is a very dangerous signal. California's affairs are America's family affairs, but if the British Empire, which is eager to create chaos in the world, gets involved, it will be a big trouble. I also heard about this matter. 2 bankers from the Bank of Barings and the Bank of France visited San Francisco. I heard that they also brought 2 ships of munitions to California. My God, I hope these munitions will not be used, Fillmore said with a worried expression. He worked hard to promote the passage of the Compromise Bill in order to avoid the outbreak of civil war. He did not want the United States to break out in civil war and split during his term. Once Britain and France get involved in California's affairs, it will cause a series of chain reactions. By then, with California as an example, it is possible that other states with ideas will put their eagerness into action and also flirt with Britain and France. This matter must be resolved as soon as possible, and Britain and France must not be allowed to take advantage of it. This is President Fillmore's current idea. Chapter 124. People can leave, but the gold stays. Those rumors were not groundless. Liang Zhao's assets grew faster than he expected. In mid-November, he roughly estimated some of his assets, which had indeed exceeded $10 million. Why roughly? Because his assets were growing at an astonishing rate every day. The gold he directly mined and the gold he exchanged for mercury alone exceeded 2,000 ounces every day, which was more than $60,000 when converted into US dollars. Even so, this was achieved when the gold production in the old mining area was weak, the new rich mining area had not yet been discovered, and the machines purchased from the east had not yet been put into use. This was just the income brought to him by gold and mercury. If the income from the highly profitable industries such as ports, real estate, catering, clothing, retail, black industry, and yellow industry was counted, Liang Zhao's daily wealth growth would be even more amazing. Bank of America is still the only bank in California. As long as the bank keeps a certain amount of reserves for the gold it collects, the rest of the gold can be used by him. Liang Zhao can now be said to have reaped the benefits of the early California gold rush. He became the biggest winner in the California gold rush, no one else. Even the assets owned by Brannan, the first millionaire in the West at the beginning of the year, are only a fraction of what he has now. The cash Liang Zhao has in his hands now is likely to have exceeded the sum of the cash flows of Vanderbilt and Buckhouse. Vanderbilt's main business is still shipping. If you want to make money, you have to run ships. His fleet is mainly steamships, and he takes the route of small profits but quick turnover. The operating costs are high and the profits will not be too high. What's more, Vanderbilt has lost a lot of money in stock speculation in recent years. As for Buckhouse, he is fond of the real estate industry, but even if Buckhouse has a keen eye and can make money from the land he buys, it will take time to wait for the land to appreciate. Liang Zhao is picking up gold directly in California, so of course the growth rate of his assets is faster than the two of them. After Mason's troops were eliminated by Liang Zhao, the consortiums that arrived in California became much more honest, and even the New York consortium stopped making trouble. Because they had actually experienced Liang Zhao's strength, they knew very well that the Chinese soldiers and the white soldiers of the California Infantry Regiment who patrolled around their camp every day and conducted so-called routine training exercises were not just decorations. They were elite soldiers who wiped out half of Colonel Mason's regiment. They could clearly feel that the eyes of these soldiers coming down from the battlefield were different from before. Now they would feel a chill when looking at them. Perhaps this was the so-called murderous aura. As for the so-called Indians in their mouths, these noble capitalists of the New York consortium knew in their hearts that they were just Liang Zhao's cover. Who in California didn't know that Liang Zhao had a good relationship with the Indians? They were almost wearing the same pants. This month alone, they saw at least 3 or 4 Indian caravans carrying their local specialties to trade with Sacramento, and even the Indians in the neighboring Oregon area ran to Sacramento to trade. These Indians walked past their mining area so openly. And those soldiers who kept saying that they would resist the Indians enthusiastically showed them the way. When they asked the soldiers why they didn't arrest the Indians, the soldiers told them that the Indians were divided into friendly Indians and unfriendly Indians. The Indians who came to Sacramento to trade were all friendly Indians, and they had to guard against the unfriendly Indians. This made the noble capitalists of the New York consortium very angry. Fortunately, they had been panning for gold in the rich mining areas on both sides of the American River for more than 3 months and had a good harvest. The embarrassed noble children and consortium representatives looked at the results of the past 3 months. 128,154 ounces of gold cheered and celebrated wildly. This gold was their biggest harvest in the past 3 months and was also their spiritual support. Without this gold, they couldn't imagine how they stayed in this hellhole for more than 3 months. This was gold worth more than $3 million, which was also a huge fortune for them who were born in a wealthy family. The miners who panned for gold by hand could only watch the noble capitalists distribute the gold. The miners only received a meager daily salary, which was barely enough to make ends meet in the Sacramento area where prices were extremely high. They naively hoped that the noble capitalists would be kind enough to give them a little gold as a reward for their hard work when distributing gold. Unfortunately, except for Milner's who generously gave each of his miners 10 ounces of gold as a reward, the other noble capitalists did not consider the miners at all. John also gave his miners 11 ounces of gold as a reward. Of course, this was not because he was kind, but because he felt that he could not be compared with Milner's. The New York consortium team packed up their gold, luggage and machines and prepared to leave the American River, where the gold resources had been exhausted, to find the next rich mine. They were ready to pan for gold while waiting for new news from New York and Congress. They hoped that the next news they received would be good news. "Gentlemen, you can't leave." The soldiers of the California Infantry Regiment patrolling nearby blocked the New York consortium's way and sent someone to notify Liang Zhao. Faced with these murderous soldiers, the bigwigs of the New York consortium did not dare to act rashly, fearing that they would anger them and that these soldiers would do something out of line. However, they still protested in a relatively mild manner. In the past, in the East, it was always others who offered them protests. Today, they finally experienced the feeling of protesting. The feeling of protesting was not good, because the initiative was never in the hands of the protesters. Upon learning that the New York consortium was leaving, Liang Zhao immediately rushed over from the new mining area of Xiangshan Gold Mining Company. Since moving to San Francisco, he rarely came to Sacramento, and even less to the mining area. It was not that he disliked the mining area being dirty and messy, and he was not the kind of person who is afraid of hardship and fatigue, but that he simply had no time. Now, in addition to dealing with his own industries, he also had to deal with California's state affairs, and he wished he could be broken in half. Today, he came to the mining area mainly because the machines purchased from the east had arrived, and he wanted to go to the mining area in person to see how effective it was and how much gold production could be increased. Relying on manpower to pan for gold has gradually become history, and California will be the era of machine panning for gold next. He didn't want to be eliminated in this round of transformation. "Gentlemen, you can go," Liang Zhao rode on his horse, squinting his eyes and looking down at the somewhat embarrassed New York noble capitalists. "Did you hear that? Your commander has spoken. We can go. Get out of the way." John's impression of Liang Zhao improved a lot after hearing this. He pushed the soldiers in front of him and was about to leave. Milner still stood there. He knew that Liang Zhao would not let them go easily. If Liang Zhao was willing to let them go, he would have ordered the soldiers of the California Infantry Regiment to let them go. There was no need to go there in person. Things were definitely not that simple. "People can go, but the gold will stay," Liang Zhao said with full energy. This sentence made these New York noble capitalists explode. They thought they had heard it wrong and were stunned. "This is the gold we found. We have the right to take it away. Why should we leave it?" John took the lead in protesting, and the rest of the New York noble capitalists stood up and protested. "This is the result of our labor for more than 3 months. This is our private property. You are robbing nakedly?" Facing the criticism from these noble capitalists, Liang Zhao just smiled faintly, took out the revolver from his waist, and fired a shot into the air to quiet them down. After the gunshot, the New York noble capitalists were instantly silent. They unconsciously stepped back a few steps, looking at Liang Zhao with some fear. When Liang Zhao put the revolver back to his waist, they breathed a sigh of relief. "You are right, but not completely." Liang Zhao turned over and dismounted, and his cold eyes swept over the group of frightened New York noble capitalists. Chapter 125, Cutting the Leaks of Capitalists and Digging into Their Corners. "You did indeed find this gold. I respect the fruits of your labor and those of these miners. But don't forget that you are panning for gold on my land. You haven't paid me even a penny of land rent in the past 3 months. In other words, this gold of yours is illegally obtained." The reason why Liang Zhao allowed these noble capitalists in New York State to pan for gold on his land was to wait for the day when he could harvest their leaks. The happier they dug, the harder they worked, and the bigger the harvest, the happier Liang Zhao would be. Liang Zhao would definitely not let them take this gold away. He wanted to take it for himself. As for offending the New York Consortium, which would narrow his path, he didn't care at all. People have already put pressure on Congress to take back the land in California, and even sent troops to attack California. This shows that the New York Consortium didn't even intend to leave him away. If these New York noble capitalists had been more polite to him and didn't do things to the extreme, Liang Zhao wouldn't be so ruthless to them today. He wanted to teach these New York noble capitalists a lesson and tell them that he was not a kind person who was easy to mess with. In this country, at least in California, the aristocratic capitalists in New York cannot do whatever they want. If they want to do whatever they want, go back to their New York and do whatever they want. Don't go wild in California anymore. "Are you going to take all our gold?" John's voice was trembling. He looked at the gold on the carriage reluctantly. The dazzling light emitted by the gold was so tempting. "No, I must not let Liang Zhao take away the gold that belongs to us." "Burn it, what are you guys doing standing there?" John shouted frantically. "This damn yellow monkey is trying to steal our gold. Transport the gold out of the mining area. I'll give you half." When Burnett and the members of the mining team heard that they could get half of the gold, they mustered up their courage and raised their guns. Seeing the other party raising their weapons, Deng Yan and the guards around Liang Zhao subconsciously blocked Liang Zhao. Liang Zhao smiled contemptuously. "You are overestimating your own abilities." Liang Zhao gave an order, and the infantrymen of the 5 surrounding companies and the members of the mine guard team of Xiangshan Gold Mining Company had already pointed their guns at them. These soldiers were responsible for guarding the New York Consortium. Their guns were always loaded with bullets, and they didn't even have to reload. To put it bluntly, Burnett and the members of the mine guard team were the retainers of these New York noble capitalists. These people were their retainers in New York, and when they arrived in the gold mining area, They naturally became the mine guard team of these New York noble capitalists, responsible for supervising the work of the miners panning for gold. These people have always been bullies who only fear the strong and bully the weak. It's okay to let them beat the Indians and scare the miners, but it would be too much to expect them to confront the professional army. Faced with so many guns pointing at them, some timid members of the mine guard team were even scared to the point of weakness. The noble capitalists of the New York Consortium were even more ugly. They had never seen such a scene before. Some of them collapsed to the ground in fear, while others lost control of their bowels and bladders. A foul smell soon spread in the air. Liang Zhao could not help but frown, cover his nose, and said with disgust, "I'll give you 10 seconds to think about it. Either lay down your weapons or die." As soon as Liang Zhao said this, the members of the mining protection team tactfully dropped their guns on the ground. The other side was a professional soldier. Even half of Colonel Mason's regiment was annihilated by them. If they really had to fight, they would be the ones who would suffer. Compared with the gold that John promised them, their own lives were more important. If they lost their lives, what was the use of the gold? After the mining protection team of the New York Consortium dropped their weapons, Liang Zhao carefully calculated the accounts with them. "I provided you with food, but you didn't pay even a cent for it. And these soldiers of mine, their salaries are high and they are very reliable. You enjoy the best security services in California without spending any money. This is very unreasonable. What do you want?" Milners interrupted Liang Zhao with a gloomy face. "Leave all the illegally obtained gold behind, all." Milner's breathing became very short, and he tried his best to suppress his inner anger. "Yes, but I am different from you. I have always been very generous. Not only will I not sue you for illegal occupation in the state court, I will also pay your salary during the gold panning period. All of you will receive 10 ounces of gold salary every month," Liang Zhao said very generously. Anyway, he didn't feel bad about being generous. It was indeed generous. The New York Consortium team now has more than 600 people. According to the 3.5 months of work, he will divide more than 20,000 ounces of gold from the gold that is easily available. He has his spies in the New York Consortium, and he knows how much gold they have mined in the past 3.5 months. Liang Zhao knows as well as they do that even if he divides more than 20,000 ounces of gold, he can at least get 100,000 ounces of gold. 20,000 ounces of gold have made the New York Consortium team disunited and demoralized, and their team has disintegrated. This money is worth spending. As long as these people stop banding together, their threat to Liang Zhao in California will be minimal. Of course, Liang Zhao is most jealous of the skilled workers brought by the New York Consortium, who can operate and use machines skillfully. These workers are exactly what Liang Zhao is in short supply at present. They are workers that are difficult to hire even if there is gold in California. He has just visited the Xiangshan Gold Mine Company and found that the company has a large gap in skilled technical workers, especially skilled workers who can operate machines. The training cycle for skilled workers is relatively long, so the best solution is of course to pick up ready-made ones directly. It is always more cost-effective to poach people than to train yourself. The aristocratic capitalists of the New York Consortium felt humiliated. In this way, wouldn't they become Liang Zhao's employees? They wanted to refuse sternly and not accept such insulting conditions. However, they changed their minds and thought that if they accepted Liang Zhao's conditions, they could at least get 35 ounces of gold, but if they did not accept Liang Zhao's conditions, they would not get a penny. So they still accepted it with a pinch of their noses. Only a few diehards such as John and Milners were unwilling to accept this condition. They had to maintain their dignity as nobles. They were old nobles in New York and became employees of Liang Zhao. Once the news spread back to New York, where would they put their faces? They were afraid that they would become the laughingstock of all New Yorkers before they even returned to New York, bringing shame to their family. "Everyone? Sir? Including us?" a malnourished, sunken-eyed, haggard worker asked with courage and expectation. Even the members of the mining team, that is, the retainers of the New York noble capitalists, were bright-eyed. For those noble children and wealthy businessmen born in noble families, 35 ounces of gold is nothing, but for these workers, it is a huge sum of money. Of course, I mean everyone. When Liang Zhao said this, the miners were extremely happy and applauded. The eyes of the members of the mining team looking at their employers became a little strange. This made John, Milners and other nobles who were unwilling to accept Liang Zhao's conditions feel a little hairy in their hearts and their backs a little cold. They had no doubt that if they were unwilling to accept Liang Zhao's conditions, these henchmen they usually kept would do something unlawful to them. 35 ounces of gold was more than $1,000. In New York, it only cost $500 to hire a top Irish killer or Italian killer to murder an enemy, and the price would be even lower if you had connections. Their killers were as cheap as their women, and it was easy to bribe them. If they were given $1,000, Milners had no doubt that these desperados would even dare to assassinate the president. Liang Zhao forced them into such a dangerous situation with just one sentence, which they had not expected. Milners and John were stubborn, but they were unwilling to gamble with their lives. Using 35 ounces of gold to test the loyalty of these followers? As aristocratic capitalists, they knew very well that human nature could not stand the test. Many of their employees were Irish and Italian, and the reason they hired them was very simple, because they were cheap and hard-working, and the cost performance was very high. It was much more cost-effective than hiring old Americans. I accept your terms. Who doesn't like gold? Ha ha ha. Milners was the first to accept Liang Zhao's terms. He couldn't help laughing up to the sky, which was a way to vent his anger, or to ridicule himself. After arriving in California, he was manipulated by a young man under the age of 20. This was something he had never expected when he set out from New York. After Milners took the lead in accepting Liang Zhao's terms, the remaining New York aristocratic capitalists no longer insisted and put down their so-called dignity. After the New York aristocratic capitalists accepted the pitiful 35 ounces of gold, Liang Zhao showed his true colors and said to the miners behind them, "If you are willing to work for Xiangshan Gold Mining Company, you can get a salary of 10 ounces of gold every month. We are willing, it's what we want, Mr. Liang. We are willing to serve Xiangshan Gold Mining Company." Hearing that they could become employees of Xiangshan Gold Mining Company, the monthly salary was still 10 ounces of gold. These miners did not hesitate at all and expressed their willingness to become employees of Xiangshan Gold Mining Company. Xiangshan Gold Mining Company and Xiangshan Mercury Mining Company are the two mining companies with the best treatment in California. They not only provide generous treatment, but also provide food and accommodation, and even enjoy free medical services. However, the thresholds of these two mining companies are very high, especially for white people. It is very difficult to get a job in these two mining companies unless they have a special skill. Being able to enter Xiangshan Gold Mining Company is what they long for. They have an employment contract with us. Seeing that Liang Zhao wanted to poach these skilled miners, John said angrily, "Without these miners, who will help them pan for gold in the future? They can't go down to the mine to pan for gold and operate the machines themselves, right? They won't do such dangerous work themselves. Yes, if you want to hire them, you need to pay a considerable termination fee," Milners said coldly. Liang Zhao was too greedy. "The gold in your hand is their termination fee," Liang Zhao also responded coldly. "This is illegal. You are cheating." John almost jumped up. "According to California law, this is very legal. Mr. John, do you want to sue me in California?" Liang Zhao asked in a joking tone. John was speechless for a moment. California is now Liang Zhao's one-man show, and it has the advantage of imperfect laws. No lawyer is familiar with California law at present. Suing Liang Zhao is tantamount to asking for trouble. For updates today. Everyone remember to subscribe to support. If you think the quality is okay and you trust me, please open an automatic subscription. Thank you very much. First make up for the average subscription update, and then make up for the monthly ticket and recommendation ticket update. The monthly ticket is now 386, and I owe 2 updates, including the monthly ticket sent by the daily update system. The recommendation ticket yesterday was 543 votes, more than 100 votes more than the scheduled 400 votes. Counting the first day, the recommendation ticket update is owed 2 updates. I will complete these updates as soon as possible. I remember every friend who rewarded and supported me, and I will thank them together later. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.